I'm Luke Story. For the past 22 years, I've been relentlessly committed to my deepest passion, designing the ultimate lifestyle based on the most powerful principles of spirituality, health, psychology, and personal development. The Lifestylist Podcast is a show dedicated to sharing my discoveries and the experts behind them with you. So, Garnet, we were talking about, before we started here, this idea around, the way I framed it was open-mindedness versus closed-mindedness, because you were talking about how our superstitions hinder our capacity for growth and evolution. I mean, I'm kind of paraphrasing what you said, and I said, that's like my interpretation of open-mindedness versus closed-mindedness, where not only can new ideas and information and ways of thinking and being get in, but also old, played out, stuck ways of thinking and being also get trapped within, and you can't get out of that operating system. And then you started to explore the correlation between those concepts and neuroplasticity. And I want to just dive in right there.
Boom. Let's do that. Okay. Let's not pretend that we know brain, mind, and which is what, and are they together or the same or different. Let's just accept that we have a mind and there's a brain and somehow they all work together. Okay. Because what you were saying, it sounds more mental, more almost psychological.
Right.
And it's true. And from my understandings, it's also true neurologically. So it's like, oh, that's good. That's good. So there's not an opposition, right? There's a complementarity there. So I like to talk about the neurology, knowing that it's totally translatable into the psychology. I don't like separating the two. And I don't know how to separate them, frankly. To me, they're not separated, so why bother to try? So I'm a monster fan of a particular model of the brain called the entropic brain model. Robin Carhart Harris, if you know the guy, Imperial College, London. And they use psychedelics in research, not really to understand the psychedelics, but to use psychedelics to understand the brain. So it's a vantage point that's unique. Some people might get turned off to the concept that it's using psychedelic compounds. That's not the point at all. And the entropic brain model, there's also another one. I don't know if people know these guys, Carl Friston, he's a preposterously brilliant genius that knows all kinds of things, and it's hard to understand him. But he's got this thing called free energy principle, and he got together with Carhart Harris and modified entropic brain model into the anarchic brain. So there are these models, and they sound peculiar or high-tech or strange, but they're pretty simple. They're pretty simple, and I love their simplicity because they help me understand what we were just talking about, open mind, closed mind. So I don't know exactly where you want to go in this conversation, but we can go a lot of places.
Yeah.
So
what I did there, I think, is called pulling a Tarantino, where you kind of go to the end of the story, at the beginning. I was just excited because we touched on something, and I had that thought, which I have quite often, like, God, we should be recording this, and I hadn't pressed record yet, so I wanted to make sure and capture that. But now, what I'd like to do is actually just back up a little bit.
Okay.
You
I like Tarantino, by the way.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I love that kind of storytelling. And we're going to talk about how the brain, it benefits from novelty and unpredictability. Even though it wants predictability, it seems to grow. And so I think that's why we maybe guys like us like how stories are told in a nonlinear way.
Yeah, well, okay. I mean, you got me all hot and heavy right now. So let's go.
I'm gonna go a little linear. So you're here in Austin visiting your daughter, but you live in northern Thailand.
That's right.
I find that just a curiosity. Anytime I meet an expat, I think, God, what motivated you to make a big move like that, and how did you make it work? Anytime I travel to another country, I think, I meet an American or Brit there or something. I think, God, how did you do it? How do you adapt to that big of a change?
Wow. I'll skip all the details. I'm a French-Canadian farm boy, and none of my family went anywhere. And as soon as I finished last year in university, it's the end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s, so you can maybe imagine the time. I moved to Isfahan, Iran, because I couldn't go to Mars, right? So I don't know. There's a feeling. The analogy I'll say is like with a bloodhound, that once it's on the scent, I think this is true. I've never really had a bloodhound, but once they're on the scent, they stay on the scent. They don't lift their head and say, I think it's over there on that hilltop. Let me just do a shortcut. So I've tried to follow the scent of consciousness, of the sacred, of that special thing that makes sense and nothing else really makes sense. I've tried to follow that my whole life, and I ended up spending a lot of time in Asia, a lot of different parts of Asia, and then decided to jump as high as I could from Southern California. The world was spinning, and I landed in Thailand.
Wow, wow.
It was something like that.
And you live up in the mountains there?
Yeah.
In Chiang Mai area?
Outside of Chiang Mai.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm a mountain forest kind of guy, and there's a lot there that is important to me. And I've lived enough in the cities.
Tell me about it.
And, I do some wild animal rescue conservation work as well with Southeast Asian apes, and that's a big deal for me.
Wow, cool.
Yeah. So I built and have a sanctuary and manage. And
really?
Yeah. There's a lot there.
Oh, man.
There's a lot there. So, I can't do that in Malibu.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah. But I lived 30 years Southern California.
Yeah, me too. 32.
Yeah, well, wow.
32. This is my first attempt at an escape from urban life, but I'm still,
Dude.
I'm still within 30 minutes from the city, but to me, this feels pretty country after living in Hollywood all those years.
Yeah,
but
okay, that's fair.
But when I get really far out,
yeah,
I always have the feeling like, no, I need to be living out here. But then, the practicality of how do you do that sets in. So this
okay. But this is the whole point, is about the adaptation to change, which is really at the core of what I think we'll talk about today. NeuroVizr and this whole thing, that there are the two words that begin with C kind of lock me into my focus. Consciousness, that we've already mentioned, and the other is change. To me, the dynamics of change totally fascinate me, because adaptation or learning or growing, all these things mean to some degree, in some way, that here you are and you're going to be different. There has to be some kind of a change. And I'm a sucker for alliterations. Maybe I like language, not as much as Jamie. Jamie is in love with words. I saw that. I'm a Jamie fan.
Jamie Wheel?
Yeah. He's like Mr. Word.
Yeah, that was a fun podcast. That was one. I've had this experience a few times where I find like I'm just barely hanging on to someone intellectually.
I got it.
I'm not trying to like belittle myself. It's just, you meet someone that's really brilliant like that, and especially such a wordsmith and just a brilliant orator. I just sit there and go, okay, hang on, Luke, stay in it. It's like fighting Mike Tyson, and you're just
no, I don't. Well, these days that would be okay.
yeah, totally.
Anyway, okay, a little bit of wordplay, but to me, I've spent a good part of my life trying to understand and appreciate that if you make a change, you have a chance to make a choice.
Ooh, nice.
Right? Change, chance, choice. So how, and I spent most of my life under a Tibetan Dzogchen teacher, but a lot of my life under a Korean Taoist teacher. And Taoism is all about the dynamics of change. The I Ching, the oldest, binary analysis of change. I Ching means classic of change, right? So it's all like change. And then the big hot news neurologically, it's not that long ago, maybe we can say about 15 years ago, is that the human adult brain, we saw it before, it would change, but only to degenerate. And of course, everybody, not everybody, but most of us know that the news is that the human adult brain can change for the positive. So here's that word change again. So understanding what change is, how to harness change, to me seems to be like the game plan. the game plan, adaptation. You mentioned, yeah, I'm a farm boy in Canada, and I'm living in the mountains in northern Thailand with apes. That's not exactly linear, right? So how do we deal with change? Because change is going to happen. How do we do it in a way that is positive? That's the primary intrigue in my life, which is why the technology that I do now is built on the dynamics of change. It's all about change and consciousness. I don't think you can have consciousness without change.
So it's like change is inevitable, but the direction of that change and the outcome is dependent on our intention, and I guess the means by which we change. Right, because you can set
Yeah,
an intention to change, but not have the proper tools
yeah.
and resources and fail at that change. And if you just do nothing and just go into entropy, then you're going to essentially, in terms of brain health and just functionality, you're going to degrade. So the change is going to happen, but it's going to be the
Yeah.
inertia of nature that's sort of dragging you into a decline.
Well, this is it. This is how I spend most of my time at this point in my life, is trying to understand that with not only the philosophical attitudes that support it, but also with the best of neurological science that is understanding it, in some cases making it more clear, giving you the base for methods. A lot of the work that I do now, frankly, is based on a mountain of research that has a different context now. The context has changed with the idea, the understanding that your brain, my brain, no matter what the state of your brain today, it can be better tomorrow. It's like, wow. I'll repeat it. No matter what the state of your brain today, if you know how, your brain can be better tomorrow.
That's good news.
That's great news. That's great news.
As you say that, I'm thinking back to long periods of time, epochs of time in my life where my brain was just really in bad shape,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
thus were my emotions and just
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
thoughts that I lived with,
yeah,
and of course then the actions that manifested out of that state of being in the world were much less than positive for anyone I interacted with, because there was so much inherent suffering
yeah,
as a result of that mental dysfunction.
yeah,
Some of it
yeah,
physical, some of it spiritual, a disconnection from self and from truth,
yeah,
meaning,
yeah.
consciousness.
I think there are, okay, here are two questions that I sometimes juice a group with, right? One is, would you like to live a long life? Raise your hand, for the most part, right? I say, okay, that's cool. Long life. Do you know, statistically, in industrialized countries, most of us live in them, that between the age of 80 and 85, which is pretty much a long life these days, very probable, the chances of you experiencing dementia are about 50-50. So, happy birthday, Luke. Here's a coin. Flip it.
Right.
Heads, you're okay. Tails, you have dementia progressing towards Alzheimer's.
Wow.
Is like, well, let me roll back a little bit on this thought. The other is the odd separation that, well, some of us have. At least we separate the brain from the body. Like, we are into fitness, into health, and what I'm doing, and tracking how many burps you did today and everything that's happening, right, right. And then the question, well, what have you done for your brain today? Right. I mean, list all the things you've done and okay, there's some nootropics or this and that, but the fact is that the brain is physical. When I go like this, my brain is lighting up. So I think divorcing or neglecting or denying brain wellness, brain health is a mistake. And the fact is, in the same way that exercise, sports medicine has gone through incredible analytical growth over the past 30, 40 years, how to optimize, right? We have to do that for the brain. Or else, guess what? You live a long life, but the you is going bit by bit, by day by day. And that's tragic. That's horrible. And it's practically epidemic.
Wow.
It's practically epidemic. So if you can do something to save your ass and your brain, it's probably a good idea.
Yeah, I love that perspective. A lot of people that are into all the health and biohacking seem to have an interest in living a really long time and the longevity aspect. And when I think about that, I get scared, you know? So it's like I just turned 52 the other day. My vision's not so great. I
Well,
mean, you're a
50.
little blurry right there, but
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want to get
That helps
addicted.
the wrinkles, man.
I don't. Yeah, I don't want to get addicted to wearing glasses. You know, other issues, back pain, weird stuff.
Okay,
You know,
okay.
tinnitus in my ear. It's like I have the signs of aging, yet overall, my vitality, my energy, my
Yeah.
sleep quality, I've never been healthier ever. You know, if you just go metabolically, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Labs are all great and all that, but man, I wouldn't want to live a day longer if I was in deep suffering or didn't have the capacity to enjoy life.
What happens if you know the lights start to get dim, and you know one of the first things is typically memory, and then analytical recall, and then famously names, and it's like, wait a minute, because you know we were told, we as a culture were told up until pretty recently, and it still really isn't like front page news, that the only thing that happens to your brain is it degenerates. Like you can't grow new brain cells. I don't know if you remember hearing these things.
Yeah, I do.
Well, that's wrong. Well,
Yeah.
it's not wrong in context. Yes, you can lose brain cells. That's bad. However, you can also grow new ones. That's good. So let's do the full sentence here, I'd say.
Let's tell the whole truth.
Let's do the whole.
You reminded me when I was a teenager, in my early life, I was terrible. I was terrible. I was terribly.
You had a late life.
I was terribly addicted to cannabis from when I was a little kid. I mean, I started smoking it very young, and you know, just trauma and all the things that make a kid want to check out. And so I did so, but I started really young. You know, they say your brain isn't fully developed until you're 25, 26.
Yeah.
I got sober when I was 26, right? And started using when I was, I don't know, 8 or 9, right?
Yeah,
And so that whole period of when my brain was supposed to be developing, I'm not only throwing cannabis at it, but later on all kinds of other toxic shit too.
Yeah.
But there was all of this, in the 80s, there was all of this propaganda around like, marijuana is going to make you grow breasts, and I mean, you used to see this in the doctor's office. That might be true because I'm
sitting up straight.
I'm probably at an A cup by now, but there were years when I did not have man boobs after smoking copious amounts of weed. But when I ended up getting sober, I was like so afraid, like because I was so damaged mentally. I was so afraid I would never be able to come back. You know, because of all that misinformation, really, that, you know, once you've damaged your brain with drugs and weed and all this, that you're just stuck in that dimly lit awareness for the rest of your life.
You're
and
just a dumbass.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And there were many years, probably 10, where I really felt dumb because I didn't have resources like the NeuroVizr and nootropics and all the things that I've done, hyperbaric chambers and all of the great things you can do for your neuroplasticity and circulation in the brain. So it's really good news to know now that science has evolved to the point where we understand, no, you
we
can
understand
actually
more, at least.
a little. Yeah, we understand a little instead of nothing.
It's like a massive difference between nothing and it's like all the infinite spaces between 0 and 1.
Right. Okay.
I have to toss this in because you mentioned the age thing. I have a formula about how we should measure age. Okay, 25 is neurologically the claim, but I just say 20 because it's an easier number to do the math. I think that a person should count their age, whatever it is. You said you're 52?
Yeah.
Okay, minus 20, so you're a 32-year-old adult. I think you can claim 32 because the first 20 are growing up and confused and all, but you know, I think that, so when you speak to somebody, I think knowing their adult age makes a lot more sense than knowing their birth chronological age. You know, for example, okay, you're that, so that makes you 32 years old, right? I'm 73, so that makes me 53 years old.
Yeah.
In terms of life experience as an adult, I think that gives a person a much better fair shake at decisions that they make and what they've done and achieved and the whole thing. That if you kind of like wipe out the first 20 years, because who knows, everything happens, but then you're kind of in the saddle. So
I think that's a great principle, and that makes a lot of sense to me, especially thinking about how misguided I was. I mean, really, if I'm honest, probably till I was 30, 35. I started to get a little bit of a clue of how to act in the world, and
yeah. I'm not sure this is on topic, but I have a lot of theories, right? Because
I love it. Throw them out.
Okay, one is I don't think a woman really comes into herself. I'm averaging, right? I think when she hits around 40, that's the time. She's going to pretty much know what she wants, what she doesn't want, what she'll accept, what she won't accept. That's my general experience so far. Not that I've had a lot of experience with women, you get my plan, but I think the same cycle is about 50 for a man.
I'm not going to argue.
Yeah, I think around about that time.
I'm 2 years on the other side of 50, and I really think, and maybe I would have thought this when I was 40 too, also, but I think now in my life, I'm just starting to kind of get a grip on things.
There you go.
Like I'm pretty sure I know what I'm doing here and why I'm doing it. But if you asked me that 15 years ago, there's a lot of confusion, at the very least, ambiguity about what this thing's all about. Confusion.
I hear you. Anyway, so here we are running around the racetrack.
No, this is great. I knew from listening to a couple of your other interviews, and I'm glad you haven't done a ton of them. I know you do a lot of public speaking, but you haven't been on 50 podcasts, and I'm like number 51. So I knew we were going to have a great conversation. One that I probably wouldn't need notes for, but there were some things I definitely wanted to specifically
go for it.
Ask you about yourself.
Sure.
And, for those listening, how I met Garnet was through Dr. Har Hari in LA, who's been on the show. He sent me a link to your NeuroVizr, this thing here. And he's pretty trustworthy when it comes to cool stuff. Like, he doesn't just text me random stuff. He's like, this thing's amazing. You got to get one. It's in development. They're just launching, etc. So that's how I found out about you. But I'm curious, what did you do for work and a career and things like that before you launched this brand and this product?
Okay, I mentioned a farm boy. I like analogies. So I learned young that you had to milk all 4 tits of the cow.
Okay, I like it.
All right. So my whole life has been in integrative healthcare and wellness, one way or the other. So these are the 4 tits, by the way, in case you wonder what I'm doing here. One has been a practitioner. The other is an educator. Another is a consultant / businessman. And the other is an inventor, designer. This is on the edge of sounding like bullshit, but it isn't for me, that it just seems like one topic. It's all one thing. And I love reading and research, and I used to get really uptight because I wanted to finish this book because I had all these other books that I wanted to read. And at one point I thought, it's just all one book. So generally I read 10 books at a time, roughly, and I'll just kind of surf from one to the other. And, it's just a lot more comfortable. So what did I do? I did the first day spa in LA in '88. I have a big 20-year-old spa in Bangkok now, and I have a Singapore-based company in Thai and Estonian, and developing tech, and I've done a lot of consulting. I'm just like damned lucky, number one, and number two, damned lucky. And number three, no risk, no reward. So I've been, I don't know the word anymore. It's like a hard word. It kind of sticks in my throat, but I've been spiritual my whole life. I've never had a choice. It would have been a choice to not follow that path. So I'm deeply interested in consciousness, and I follow, traditions seriously in practices. And I had, a fantastic positive experience with psychedelics when I was younger, and I don't do now, although because of experimentation with the device, microdosing and these things. I'm a boring guy. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't just what do you do? Well, I try to open my mind and my brain, and I take care of apes,
Yeah.
Here I am.
To me, that's exciting. There's nothing more interesting than meditating. There would have been a time in my life when, that was not true. But
yeah.
I mean, the places one can go when you're exploring consciousness are,
the place I want to go?
To me, infinitely more interesting than here in the 3D.
No, I want to be right here. This is my trip. right now. This is my meditation right now. If I don't take the chance to just like soak you and this up, then all the other stuff I misunderstood.
That's a great point.
Right? Like if it's about, I mean, we did everything in our life for this exact instant. So don't miss the parade.
So an integration,
Mm.
that's the word that comes to mind.
We'll talk about that because I got a gun
All
loaded
right.
on information integration.
Okay,
Like
good.
I got a lot of guns here, man. Like, I'm in Texas.
Okay.
Lock and load.
Yeah, you certainly are, sir. You're in the thick of it
Yeah.
now.
All right.
So you
I'll have trouble over that, but that's okay.
a lot of people that have listened to the show for a while have heard
Yeah.
people use the term brain entrainment. So I've
Yeah.
interviewed, all kinds of people
Yeah.
into neurofeedback and all
Yeah.
kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
And I noticed that you use a different term
Yeah.
in conjunction to the work you're doing with NeuroVizr, and that's
Yeah.
brain engagement. So maybe you
Yeah.
could break down the defining characteristics of those and
Yeah,
how they
okay.
differ.
I'd be happy to, right? It's a biggie. Because I've been doing this for a while, I mentioned my age. So, biohacking to me is the sequel to the human potential movement. Like, the definition of a sequel?
What?
Take something that you've done right and keep on doing it until you get it wrong.
That's good.
Anyway,
That's good.
let's
In
put
the
that
film
aside.
industry, that is definitely applicable.
Okay. Anyway, brain engagement, Okay, I was involved in brain entrainment in the mid '80s, and it's a principle which is based on a neurological fact. It's called the frequency following response. That it was recognized in the '30s. Nobody knew what to do with it. It kind of went to sleep. Technology was too poor in any way to really be analytical. Came alive in the '60s, pretty much in the '70s. So once, and we know this, listen to music and you tap your foot. And you don't have to have effort to do it because the brain will tend to follow a repeated signal, a frequency following response. So the word that evolved was brain entrainment for frequency following. So those two things mean the same thing. And this was a real big deal in the early ages of biofeedback and brain entrainment. It all hit pretty much early mid 80s. Brain entrainment works, but not as well as you'd like, is the honest truth, in my opinion. And it sucks at neuroplastic change. And I'll tell you why. I'm interested in neuroplastic change. I use brain entrainment in certain purposes. Brain entrainment reinforces existing order in the brain. That's very important to understand. In the model, the entropic brain model, which inevitably I'll talk about because I must, right? That there is an upper zone of information access and a lower zone of information integration. Integration is really important in the brain because it lets us do what we're doing right now. When I look at you, your head doesn't turn into flame. Well, it is right now. Let me calm that. Right. That we have a reliable interpretation of what's going on. That reliability is, from the neo-Darwinian, it really is good for survival. When you walk down the stairs, your foot goes to where you think the step is. We need that. Brain entrainment helps reinforce existing order in the brain. It works at cementing certainty. Okay. I'm interested in the polarity of that, the complementary thing, where there are times when what you have as a pattern doesn't match the adaptive demand. You've got to make something new. So how do you make something new? Well, brain entrainment doesn't do that. Brain entrainment reinforces, and I'll tell you precisely the formula of how to get the brain to change. There's a precise formula. And you'll see that the brain entrainment, which is not a bad thing. I'm not coming down on brain entrainment, but it's like there's salt and pepper. Don't think salt is pepper. Salt is salt. Brain entrainment works at cementing, fortifying pre-existing orders, what are called technically the priors that are in the brain. So because I'm interested in change, and I know those techniques don't act towards the dynamics of change, they don't act towards neuroplastic triggering, I think, well, I'm going to call it something different. So I thought, I made up a term called brain engagement. Engagement. And, I mean, this is the big deal. This is a real big deal, is knowing how to engage the brain for dynamic change. Okay, so this is the quickie. I'm a talker, so, jump in anytime.
Hey, we got plenty of time.
Okay, well, I love plenty of time.
This is a podcast where we don't leave anything out.
Okay, what's for dinner?
In many cases, somebody has to drag us out of here. Or the next guest shows up or something. I'm like, we got to end. But no, we're fine. Please elaborate.
There are 3 things in any method for neuroplastic change that you have to have. It doesn't matter what the technique is. These 3 principles or elements have to be there. And for camera, there's a secret sauce, a 4th. So the first thing is the technique. The method requires sustained attention, focus, attention without tension T. So you've got to be drawn into it. It holds a kind of a magnetic quality. And when you think of it, pleasure and pain, what do they have in common? Right? So I always use this analogy. So if it's on camera somewhere else, I apologize. Let's say right now that I took an ice pick and jammed it several times into your left knee. Right? I assume that would be painful. Let's say, and this is maybe a bit peculiar, but we can imagine it. Let's say suddenly your left knee has some kind of orgasm, very pleasurable. What do those 2 things have in common? Your attention goes to your left knee. So there's something precisely important about matching adaptive demand that both pain and pleasure use. Your attention. That's number 1. Number 2 is this thing called marginal demand. If you can lift 30 kilos, well, we're in the US. If you can lift 50 pounds, I'm not going to give you 70 pounds if I'm a trainer. I'm going to give you maybe 52 pounds or 55 pounds. That there's a demand level that is marginal to your threshold. So it's a little bit difficult. It's not like really hard, but it's like a little bit. That's why in the NeuroVizr sessions, we'll talk about that, where the light and sound, sometimes there's a little bit of a hoo-ha, like hang in because of that marginal demand quality. So, in that way, the brain responds to a kind of exercise principle, just like the body as a whole, right? So what do you have to have for neuroplastic methodology? Sustained, focused attention, marginal demand, a little bit hard, but not really. And then the third thing, a little bit more diffuse, is kind of an open-minded belief, a willingness. You don't do it like, this shit is stupid, my wife makes me want to do it, and I'll do it, okay, but it's not going to work. Like, that degrades the neuroplastic stimulation potential. Right. And Allison, you didn't hear that. Anyway, so those are the 3. Focused attention. This is about brain entrainment, by the way.
Yeah.
Focused attention, marginal demand, open-minded willingness, and the 4th, the secret sauce that exponentially kicks up these 3 is you enjoy it. Like, I really wow, I really love this doing that because it's a very complex neural hormonal state called enjoy. Enjoy is special neural hormonally. So if you toss in that alchemy of enjoyment, the other 3 work better. Okay, now, brain entrainment, again, I'm not coming down on it. It's just what it is. Frequency following response means that when the signal repeats over and over again, your brain will follow it kind of automatically. You don't have to have focused attention. And because the brain is, the signal actually superimposes on the brain for about 6 minutes, then the brain might start to fire up on its own. But that's a side point. That you don't have to pay attention because your brain will follow the frequency because it is so predictable. If it's so predictable, don't worry, it's going to happen because our brain is basically a prediction-making organ. It looks for predictability. That's a lot of the other entropic brain theory. And it's not difficult. There's no marginal demand. As a matter of fact, it's easy. As a matter of fact, you don't even have to, quote, pay attention. Just lay back and listen to whatever it is. So what you see is the cardinal first and second elements that make a neuroplastic technique engage the brain are absent in brain entrainment.
Wow, that's super cool. Very interesting distinction.
Yeah.
Would you give a couple examples for those that are unaware of some modality that would use the entrainment? Would it be binaural beats or neurofeedback or something of that nature?
If I hear binaural beats again, I will. Yes. Binaural beats. I mean, I have a little bit of emotion attached to binaural beats because it was so well understood. You know, the first public publication it was Scientific America, 1973. Binaural beats. Like there's this phenomena that you put something here and a little something different here, and the brain gets the middle. So 20 hertz here, 25 hertz there, and the brain says, "Oh, it's about 5 hertz." So it's real. It works. It's audial for the most part, although there is some secret talk about binoptics. We'll skip that. But binaurals, it was also understood because it was a lot of heavy duty research at the time. There was a lot of promise unfulfilled, I have to say. Read books like Mega Brain and so on that were written in the mid-late 80s. You know, this stuff I was going to say shit, right? This stuff was going to change everything, and it didn't. So anyway, that it was understood that binaural beats work as a superimposition, and if you continue regularly for about 6 minutes minimum, then the brain would probably start to pick up and do it. Before that, it's called superimposition. The brain is not really following it. The brain is being forced upon the brain, like it overrides the brain. Superimposition. And then the brain will say, okay, I give up, I'll do it. So it was well understood in publications and good research papers that binaural beats work, but not very well. Isochronic, which can be as irritating as like a dog that won't stop barking, work very, very well. So what you find out is that crafting soundscapes, I'll call them, with isochronics or monochronics that work really, really well is tough because you got to kind of be artful at putting in those sounds that could be irritating as all hell.
Like a pink noise kind of sound?
Yeah,
like
you do that. Otherwise, it's like me, 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 me,
Right.
me, 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 me.
You reminded me of something I forgot about. I used to do these hemisync tracks.
Same deal.
From the Monroe Institute.
Let's astral project together. Right? That was the whole
I used
thing.
to listen to that stuff for hours just because my head was on fire and it felt like cool water, you know?
Okay, you're a stoic. I mean, good for you.
Yeah. But there was I remember some of those tracks were really weird, like a wow, 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 this kind of stuff.
Well, I'll give you credit then you hung in.
I did.
But most people won't want to hang in, especially because we're so conditioned that, I sometimes swear, so if shit slips out.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Okay,
it's fine.
So that, we want shit to always be like pleasant or good or I don't know, whatever. So the thing is with binaural beats is that it's drop dead easy to make any kind of fluid Celtic harp or bird or whatever, and you have this kind of back in there. So it's pleasant for the listener. It's not irritating as it potentially could be if you don't know how to do it. So it is like dumbass easy, to make brain entrainment using binaural beats. The fact is, and I'm sorry, it's just that they don't work as well as other brain signaling for the frequency following response.
And we're still talking about entrainment here.
That's entrainment.
Not the other category, the
engagement. Yeah.
So where would neurofeedback and different biofeedback, would any of them be, from your perspective, classified within that first category?
No,
of entrainment?
It's different. I mean, to understand like neurofeedback. Neurofeedback is really the only form of biofeedback that has persisted in the popular sense. I was involved in early biofeedback a lot. I have a degree in it and so on, right? So neurofeedback is excellent. There are competing theories amongst different societies or practitioners, so it's not like dead on certain, but it's very good. And depending on the skill of the practitioner and the philosophy they work with, it's really good because you can see pretty much real time behaviors going on in a person's brain and help to coach them towards other kinds of states or behaviors. It's really good. It's highly dependent, in my opinion, on the skill of the practitioner, and do know that there are different kind of methodological philosophies involved in it. So it's not only one thing.
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've done neurofeedback with a number of different practitioners, and
Yeah.
they all had, in some cases, pretty polarized points of view about what works, what doesn't, how
Yeah.
you do it, how you don't, what the
Yeah.
benefits are. And
Yeah.
there's not a consensus in the neurofeedback,
There you go.
community
Yeah,
about what
it's
it is and how you use it, essentially, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's credible, it's interpretive, and it's not because like it's they don't know what they're doing. It's because the brain is a lot more complex, a lot more complex. One of the oh, we won't go down there. I have many. I'm like Google Maps here. I can go like on all these different
I like
directions.
that.
I don't want to bury you
No, it's
in
fine.
my esoteric.
I love it, and if
Uh,
anyone listens to this show on a regular basis, they're here for that.
okay,
So
all right,
it's all
all
good.
right. So hit me.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you then about brain priming and sensory enrichment.
Yeah. Okay. Now we're getting juicy. Sensory. Let's talk sensory enrichment first. Uh, I'm a Canadian-born U.S. citizen, live in Thailand. Blah blah. A Canadian guy named Hebb, in the late 40s. Actually, he's the father of neuroplasticity. Uh, was very much intrigued about the possibility of progressive brain improvement and growth. At that time, I mean, this is 75 years ago almost. People didn't tune in. His theory ended up being called Hebbian learning. We call it neuroplasticity. Okay, so he was intrigued by sensory input. And this is a monstrously big topic of sensory perception bottom up in relation to cognitive conception top down. This is like the money shot of the topic we'll get to. Sensory enrichment. So what he did is he had, lab rats, same strain, same species, everything, same food, everything the same, except their environment. One had a boring environment, one had a very enriched environment. That's it. And they, sacrificed the rats later on. And not only were they behaving differently when they're alive, the boring ones are aggressive and moody and territorial, and the enriched ones seem to be like Mardi Gras. It's like life's pretty good, right? So by behavior, this is different. Then they open up their heads, gross, look at the brains, and the physical brains of the sensory enriched rats were very different. They had all of these complex synaptics. They had neurogenesis. Nerves were growing. Areas of the brain were bigger than the other rats. The only thing was their environment. So that was the birth of what's called environmental enrichment. And right now, I was on a panel with a couple of Thai neurologists, I don't know, a couple months ago, and they have this process now in at least a couple of the hospitals where they have rooms set up, and they use those rooms either for autistic kids or for early dementia, because they know that the enrichment of the environment is a generalized, non-specific neuroplastic trigger. Right? Okay. So 5 things. 5 things. If you do these 5 things, you will faithfully trigger non-specific or generalized neuroplastic growth, which means it's ready to be absorbed into some new topic, new skill. 5 things. First thing, combine 2 of the senses. These days in autism, it's very popular among certain communities of technique. They combine touch and smell. Okay, you combine 2 senses for a unified experience. I combine light and sound. Number 2, the experience should be uncommon. It's not the kind of thing that you normally encounter during your average day. It's unusual, it's unique. That's number 2. Combine 2 senses, unique, diminished or free from distraction. So there shouldn't be other shit happening to compete. So combine two, unusual or uncommon, no distraction. The fourth one is you're not forced to do it. You do it of your own free will. You're not like tying you down and doing like Clockwork Orange.
Which goes back to the secret sauce of enjoyment. Right?
That's the fifth one.
Okay. Okay.
That's the fifth one. The same thing, that it should or needs to be pleasant or enjoyable. If you do these
Right,
five,
because I guess you could do something willingly, but you're not necessarily ecstatic about doing so.
well, it's just that's why I call it the secret sauce.
Yeah.
Right? It's this very peculiar motivating experience called enjoy. Undeniably, all the way back to brains of yesteryear's rats to this point right now, there is this big thing called environmental enrichment. There's a subset called sensory enrichment. And I work with sensory enrichment processes because they will reliably trigger generalized neuroplastic growth. Then what you do is you insert a vector or a theme or a purpose, and the brain is ready, willing, and able to absorb it. So sensory enrichment is a 75-year-old methodology that now is being resurrected because of neuroplasticity. Like, oh, it's real. Hebbian learning, thanks Heb, but now we'll call it neuroplasticity, and we can do it, and it works. So that's just research fact. 75, I'm 73, so it's like older than me. I didn't think anything was older than me, right? And then the other on the quickie is brain priming. Priming basically is a real simple concept that you do something first so that the second thing works better. And that was the big, like, woo la la, 64 Olympics where the East Germans were like doing weird things and it's like, well, what, what's happening? Because there are different kinds of brain priming. There are actually 6 categories. We'll skip the details. But one of them we see all the time. If you watch basketball, there's a free throw, not Shaq from those days, right? You'd see the guy, doing like this and then taking the shot. Well, he was priming his brain so that the second action would be better. If you do sensory enrichment processes, automatically what it does is it primes the brain for whatever you do next. Okay, not a product pitch, but a fact. I see the NeuroVizr technology as everybody's best friend. I'm not in competition with any device or any method. Or like if you want to do, like you're going to do your yoga or you're going to do your neurofeedback. We have neurofeedback practitioners that use the Visor before, and in a 50-minute session, it drops 20 minutes off their session. The person drops right into a response at like a third to almost 40% of the session faster. Why? Because the brain is primed through a sensory enrichment process so that it's hungry. That's the whole point. Brain priming kind of makes the brain hungry for information.
Wow, interesting. Well, that would explain why this morning I did 2 back-to-back 11-minute journeys with the NeuroVizr.
Yeah.
Just because Alice and I have been meditating together for 20 minutes. That's a new thing we started doing. And so I was like, well, I'll run a double. I usually only do one.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh man, he's coming soon. Being the him. I got to get my notes prepped. And I went in my office and had actually not, even though I was in a hurry per se, I was not stressed about getting prepared. And I found that my mental capacity was really high.
Yeah.
It was like able to be kind of logical and creative and have fun with it. It's really interesting. So without even knowing that priming thing, I've been playing with the NeuroVizr specifically before I need to do something that's either mentally demanding or creative.
Cool.
Which for me usually happens at a computer. I'm doing something for work. So that makes perfect sense.
Hey, let's talk about 20 minutes. I can't let that one slide by.
Oh, yeah.
I can't. I mean, come on.
Well, that was another question I had is why are the journeys that are in the NeuroVizr app, they're all, I think you have 5 or 11 minutes you can choose. And I was always curious about that. And is there any harm in doing 20 minutes, or 22 minutes, I guess, effectively?
No, there's no harm. Okay. Why? Again, neurologically based, that the average human brain is able to stay with sustained attention for between 10 and 12 minutes. A simple amount of training, and you get to that point. Then you've got to do a refresh. And then when you refresh, you can hit it again. But after the second refresh, all the local neurotransmitter sourcing is depleting. So you kind of max out at around that time. So this is why in like traditional Shamatha Buddhist meditation, Vipassana, like you train 20 minutes. Old TM, you do 20 minutes twice a day. The Halo device, which I think has gone bye-bye, you do that for 20 minutes, a motor primer, right? That TED Talks, 18, 20 minutes. The old, remember this TV show thing? The half-hour TV show minus the commercials was 22 minutes with a break in between the first and the second. So these things evolve forward with efficiency because it's based on the neurology. So I thought, well, because I do a lot of experimental work with different time periods, but for the like the Bam Bam, I do 11 minutes. And I put in 5 minutes because why not? It's a kind of a reinforcement, a refresher. You don't have the time, or you do 11 minutes and you want to like just like hit it a little bit, or if you're on a vector or a theme, because these are all theme or vector designed. They move in certain directions, what are technically called probability states. So if you're working with something in the focus category, it doesn't make you focus. It works towards the probability of enhancing that state. So you can't really make the brain be a certain way. The brain will have to cooperate, right? Unless you force it into an ordered state. I have brain entrainment in the device. There's some things I haven't released yet. So if you want it, it's there. To me, it's like the easiest thing in the world to design, right? So the principle is, to the best of my ability, defensible in terms of neurology. It's defensible. Of course, there's the artist part of me, that wants to the creative, but I try to stay, in the between the two fence posts on the whole thing neurologically.
Cool. That's helpful. Also, another thing I did this morning was, I guess maybe not long enough before I did my NeuroVizr session, but for breakfast I had probably about 10 micrograms of LSD,
Okay.
which is like a good non-perceivable, nootropic kind of dose. I find that once or twice a week. I actually did it yesterday. Normally I wouldn't do it 2 days in a row.
Yeah.
I do it twice a week, but spread out kind of. For different reasons.
You went Stamets over Fadiman?
yeah. But, I was like, I got 2 interviews today. I felt so good yesterday and so focused and creative.
You got 2 today?
Yeah, one after you, yeah.
Yeah. Are you seeing somebody else?
Yeah. Totally. Cheating on me, man. But anyway.
Dude, I have the whole day.
I did have I had a great NeuroVizr session. It was maybe only an hour after, so I don't know if it had, kicked in per se. But
yeah.
It seems to me that NeuroVizr could, on its own, for someone that's never interested in microdosing psychedelics at all, seems like it has a similar effect. And is that true? And is there any risk or benefit involved with doing what I did this morning of stacking a microdose with the technology?
2 answers, different but both true. One is, with what I assume you have access to, it's very similar to microdosing and highly compatible. However, probably next year I have it's true. I have a full microdosing app. The whole thing designed specifically on the neurology of microdosing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's built in, but it's but it is also thematic, which is a huge thing. Plus, a giant reward is the fact that you have very rich reward experience when you're doing it. Unlike microdosing, where I have a lot of buddies, men and women, that it's like micro mezzo, because they're like, I want to be a little bit high.
Yeah.
Again, this is, in my opinion, hard ass neurology. that it's defensible. And I write a bunch of things sometimes for Biohackers Magazine, right? And I published an article called uh, "Is Microdosing a Unique Form of Brain Priming?" And the conclusion is yes. And here's the short story, because all the stories can be long. When it comes to neuroplasticity, there are four. I use my hands a lot. I used to teach a lot, right?
Well, that's right. You have your own dedicated camera, so the people that are at least watching this podcast will be able to see what you're doing.
Okay, thank you. They're called the four activation phases of neuroplasticity. And it's quite well appreciated by this point that there's an initial stimulation, and I'll give you some of the timelines on this. There's an initial stimulation, then there's a modulation phase where uh, sensitive things kind of calm down and the doors start to open. And then there's a relaxation phase where the changes get to move around because the sensitivity is not blocking them. Then there's a differentiation phase where they kind of integrate into the system. This is a very predictable four-phase process with any neuroplastic technique. Right? There's stimulation, modulation, relaxation, differentiation. Okay. When you do the NeuroVizr or any other well-crafted neuroplastic technique, but I can say certainly if you do a NeuroVizr technique, because it's based on that, it's hard to maybe accept, but the real effects begin when the light and sound end. Again, an analogy. Eat food, you're hungry, eat, enjoy, taste, textures, color, the whole thing, yeah. When you finish eating, you begin digesting. And the whole point, you may enjoy, it is enjoyable, otherwise maybe we wouldn't eat. So, neo-Darwinian, again, it's for survival purposes, we're supposed to enjoy doing it. And we do, for the most part. The light and sound are the stimulation phase. And then when that ends, that's when the integration starts. So, like today, when you finish doing the 1 or 2, for 1 to 2 hours, you're in a state called hyperplastic. You are super sensitized for information input. And that's the stimulation. The stimulation phase is about, on the outside, around about 2 hours. That's in any methodology, that you have that potential for information access that you would not normally have. Then, after that, there's a period where it will max and kick up about 8 hours later. The modulation phase is from the 2 to 8 hours, so that 8 hour is there. So it comes up again, but at a lower amplitude. Like, oh. Then the relaxation phase, 24 hours. Integration, not surprisingly, follows circadian cycle. It's like, well, that kind of makes sense. And then the differentiation is that last 48, right? And then you pause, and then you do it again. That is the 3-day Fadiman microdosing schedule.
Oh, interesting.
That's the neurological basis for it.
Do you think he knew that?
I don't think so. I think he sussed it out.
Interesting.
Because this is quite, well, I mean, his stuff is not that old. So well, let's say, like, I don't know. The guy is a brilliant, investigator. But this makes sense. So, like, I'm more interested in the endpoint action than the agent. If you order something online, do you really care whether the knock at the door is DHL or FedEx?
Definitely not.
It's like you got your shit, right? Your stuff, your object. Right? It's a habit, right? So
I understand.
Yeah. So of course, I'm intrigued by the agents, but I'm far more interested in the endpoint actions. Like the word psychedelic is normally used as a noun. an object. This is a psychedelic compound. But I like to use it as an adjective, a psychedelic effect. Like psychedelic art, you don't eat the art. That's not the point, right? So psychedelic can be used as an adjective. And this is entropic brain. If we don't get to it in this talk, I seriously say dive into Robin Carhart Harris in Imperial College, UK, because of, they've developed this for a number of years now. It's an incredibly elegant model of the brain that makes total sense with all that we're bumping into. It's just glorious, I think. The brain is built for the psychedelic experience. Just because something is uncommon doesn't mean it's abnormal. That's important. Just because something is uncommon doesn't mean it's abnormal. And the psychedelic state can be achieved from many agents, from many avenues. Even there is no single psychedelic state. And I had a real big, like, boing, wow, grok, aha moment about a year ago, plotting out the neurology of these things. And I'm dead certain that Joseph Campbell, right, that the hero's journey is specifically the neuroplastic phenomena. It describes exactly the brain neurology of habituation, the need for change, the decision to leave certainty and go into uncertainty, to leave the integration, to go into information, to have all these things, to have, blah, 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 if you know the hero's journey, and then to return with the treasure. I think it's evident to me in my little world that the hero's journey is the proto-myth, because it's an expression of the proto-neurology of proto-consciousness. Every neuroplastic experience to me is a micro-hero's journey.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
I like that you're eliminating the fact that there are so many different means by which somebody can explore these realms.
Yeah.
Because everyone has their own preference. To me, there's not anything in the realm of consciousness I probably wouldn't try unless it's going to hurt someone else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because all of the different kind of windows into God's mansion are interesting to me. They all have their own unique sort of personality, right? But there are going to be certain people that would never want to put a light and sound device on their head because they're just not into technology. And there are other people that would love that and would never in a million years take even the microdose of something like psilocybin or LSD, or people don't have a temperament for meditation or breath work. Everyone kind of has their own unique preference, but we all, I think, inherently deserve to have access to this neuroplasticity and this expansion and enlightenment of consciousness.
Yeah.
At least for those that are interested.
It's adaptation and growth. And, the risk, here's another analogy. You're laying in bed on your right side and it's real comfy and you like it. After a while, oddly, it's not comfortable anymore. And you want to get on your left side. You can't go directly from your right side to your left side. You have to go through this thing called turning over. And when you turn over, you move into the realm of unpredictability. Well, I'm going to roll over. I know but you roll over, then your foot gets stuck in the blanket and you have to untwist it. And then you're turning over and then your pillow moves and then your wife says something and says, stop waking me up. I'm just turning over. And finally you end up on your left side, but then you wiggle and it's right? So you can't go directly from old neurologically. You can't go directly from old order to new order. It's not a direct thing. You have to go through an abandonment of order. You have to go through, chaos is not random. Chaos is just so complex we don't know what the shit's going on, but there is still determinism in there. You want to turn over, not like the wind is blowing you there. So neurologically, we have to be able to let go to some degree in order for change to happen. And that capacity is native to our neurology. Forget about the psychology right now because we really can't separate them, but that is the game. Growth, learning, adaptation, tripping. I don't care what you call it, that, again, in that there's a lot going on right now with brain modeling that is like just the juiciest stuff because it helps me at least, and a lot of other people understand that that old zone, the low zone, that's the realm of integration. And this upper zone, we'll call it the psychedelic zone, but I don't mean, acid psychedelic, but why not? That's the zone of information. That's the hero's journey, where you leave home and you go, well, classically, into the underworld. You go into the unknown, and you have trials and tribulations and tests and experiences and allies, and then you realize a treasure, and then you absorb the treasure, and then you leave that world and come back into the ordinary world with a treasure that you can share. That is the hero's journey, and that's how our brain works. That's how our brain works.
Wow. Yeah, it describes so many transcendent experiences.
It should.
That's really the crux of it if you had to map it out in a little infographic that a 5-year-old would understand, right?
Or any culture that lacked the kind of analysis that we do, but they know this is predictable. This is the way it works.
Right.
This is the way it works.
How does first language and neuro reality work?
Well, I've been following a path of exploration and some amount of discovery, and then you bump into things, and we want to give it a name. I think even the unknown, when we call it the unknown, we somehow feel a little better that the thing we don't know is the unknown now that we've named it. And actually, even in trauma programs, giving a feeling a name reduces the amygdala sensitivity. So if you have grief and you even give it a name, like Georgie or grief, so we want to give things names. Me too. So I have, this thinking, because I like to work with principles. Nature is efficient. Once a principle works, you can kind of expect you're going to find it some other place again. Because why? Because it works. And usually it's pretty simple. There's this tendency where simple things done well work well. Why be complicated? So I thought, okay, I'm imagining some kind of like, I don't know, Jurassic Park, whatever, but when things are all growing and evolving on Earth, when it's happening, when things are growing, it's all the same air, it's all the same sunshine, it's the same water, it's the same stuff, right? So when things are growing, inevitably there's going to be proximity. And if there's proximity, then there's bound to be interactions. And if there are enough interactions, there must be interrelationships that result from the interactions. And if there are interrelationships, there must be shared information. And that shared information must result in some kind of communication between things. And communications require a language. So what's the first language? And I think that it's a combination of mechanical vibration and electromagnetic radiation. Those things, mechanical vibration requires a medium, stuff, and electromagnetic radiation doesn't. It can cross through what we'll call a vacuum. So I think mechanically vibrating and electromagnetically radiating form the basis of the first language. Of course, mechanical vibration we call sound, and electromagnetic radiation we call light. So I think light and sound and all of their kind of, derivatives, they form the basis of a first language. I think second language is movement. I think third language is ideation and cognition. And I think that complex beings like you and me and others, I'm not so sure about this plant, but I'll give it the credit, that we don't throw away the first because we have the second, that we integrate. And that right now, first language is fully operational, as is second language, as is third language. So that's my definition of first language. Neuroreality, because there's like VR, virtual, augmented, and everything. I don't know if this is actual reality. I'm not quite sure, but I think, well, neuroreality. So it's a little bit of a play with maybe words, but I think it's neuroreality is when you turn the senses inward. It's like turning virtual reality inside out. So I don't know. I was trying to be a little bit clever. I'm not sure I was very clever, but I call it neuroreality. It's, when you meditate or when you trip or whatever it is, that there is a reality that you encounter that is not primarily fed from the external senses.
Yeah, and non-local.
Yeah,
I like it.
Okay, well then.
I like it. I mean,
okay, that makes me happy. If
I like
somebody likes
naming
it.
things too, especially
Yeah.
because in the more etheric realm of ideas, as we're discussing here in part, it is difficult to describe them because there often is a lacking of the terminology.
Yeah.
For some of this, we're kind of making it up as we go, and so
Yeah.
somebody's got to come up with what you call this state or that state because
Right.
it doesn't
Yeah,
exist, right?
yeah. We have
things in the nonlinear realm,
Yeah.
by their very nature, are hard to define and
Yeah.
name. So you gotta have something.
Well, one thing that you thought for the website, maybe it didn't make it in or something, but the NeuroVizr is now legal in all states of mind.
Dude, that's good. You guys got to use that. You got to use that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about something that you've called, and maybe we've covered it again. These are terms that I'm like taking from your content. I'm just curious about
Sure.
lucid microdosing or neurodosing. I mean,
Yeah. Well, that's the other. We were talking about that.
Okay.
And that the thing is, and let me see if I can recall. Well, the research was in the 50s. I'm forgetting right now who is doing it. So I try to remember these things because then I'm not lying, right? That some of the first experiences or experiments happened in the 50s where they used photic stimulation, flashing lights, and what they then called subclinical doses of mescaline. And I mean, the research is there. Anybody can read it.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, and yes, and it is.
I'm in.
Yeah, and I have been. So the reports were, it's a little overstated because they didn't have a lot of comparatives. Mescaline was real new at the time. You remember the 50s? It was the whole story of the folks discovering peyote, but that the statements in the research was that if they did a subclinical dose of mescaline and did the photic stimulation, that the subject had the visual experiences similar or equal to a full dose of mescaline. And that goes back, that's 75 years ago. So,
wow.
Yeah. And so when I was designing, well, I don't know what to call it yet right now. We're, lucid microdosing or neurodosing. This is a little bit of a, what do you call it? A spoiler, because we're coming out like next in 23 with this. It's all done. I would, because I've been developing this technology and the experiences over the past 5 years. I've done, I don't even know, thousands of hours of the light sound stimulations because I make them, I create them. So, the chef has to taste the food, right? I have a lot. So I'm pretty good. I'm very good at recognizing kind of the saturation colors and the geometrics and all of it when I create a session or what you call a journey. So I've done both with psilocybin and mescaline, micro, and wait a couple of hours, and then run a NeuroVizr session, and the subjective, what I'll call richness, enrichment, and actually that's the term they use in entropic brain. As you move up, they call it degrees of enrichment or richness. 30-40% more rich colors, geometrics, depth, perceptions, all of the interdimensionalities. So for me, again, in my little world, that shows me undoubtedly that a microdose, a subclinical, subperceptual dose is working in the brain dynamically, because I will have evidence of that when I do the Visor session, that it lights up 30-40% more than normal. And I'm very good at recognizing what I'll call normal or common, having done so much of it. So I think, well, shit, there you go. There you go. And then, studying the neurology, brain priming techniques, there's real strict methodology in designing a light sound session. So if you go in, I mean, you'll see the app, undoubtedly, that you choose whatever theme you want, because I can move it in a probability state, which you don't have in normal microdosing. That's just pure intention.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's some advantage there. And then also you get a lot, but so then you choose, I put 4. You choose the Fadiman protocol, Stamets, Microdosing Institute, or one more, the regular one, I forget the name. So you choose whatever one you want, and then you go into it, and then it sets up the session. Let's say you're working on creativity, whatever. So there's a dose day, a trans day, and a norm day session. And they're tracking in the app, and then you know which one you did, and you go back and you follow it. So the trick is, well, there are many tricks, actually. One of the tricks, right?
Indeed there are.
one of the tricks is learning how to, and to what degree, to destabilize the brain. Destabilization is really important. That's what a psychedelic will do. It destabilizes default mode network. And for God's sakes, another one, alpha. I didn't grow up, but I was into this stuff early when alpha was like it, alpha, and if you can just do alpha, and
alpha brainwaves you're referring to.
Pardon me, alpha brainwaves, yes. And this, for one thing, there's no single state, but the thing about a psychedelic, the alpha, have to understand, the alpha brainwave is the control freak of the brain. It's the control freak. It allows you calm, clear focus, and it reduces distractions. That's really a good thing. But a psychedelic of any sort, I'm not saying a psychedelic compound, but a psychedelic agent suppresses alpha. The control freak is like kicked out the bad door, which allows all the unique, unusual network connections to take place, because alpha, the control freak, ain't at the party.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's like right off the top. So when you're doing these kinds of methodologies, you have a very sensitive design factor when you consider the alpha element. Because if you insert alpha, then what happens is the brain wants to lock down again. But what you want is information access. And alpha says, no, dude, you got to pay attention to what I'm focusing on. So destabilize the default mode network, reduce the sensitivity in the amygdala, suppress alpha, and now you've got a formula. And to how much you destabilize and how much you do that ends up as being a dose day or a transition day or a norm day. So you play with the design characteristics to mimic what a psychedelic compound would do.
Wow. So this program that you're describing, this is going to be in the NeuroVizr app or its own thing in 23? Or do you don't know yet?
Let's call it, it's going to happen for sure.
Okay. we'll figure it out.
Whether it comes in a round box or a square box, we'll figure that out.
Because that sounds really,
it's a real big deal. I got to tell you, it's a real big deal.
That sounds like a massive breakthrough.
Well,
actually,
it is cool. In my head. I can say that for sure.
Yeah. For those listening, I realized I kind of just jumped into this stuff and started talking about this NeuroVizr, and never really, I don't think, described what it is for people. So for those that are watching the video, can you do me a favor there, Brandon, and give me a zoom in? I'm just going to do a little demo. I know some people are listening and they're like, we can't see you, this is boring, but for those watching, so this is the app, and so I've just turned this headset device on.
And it's powered, right?
It's powered, yeah. Okay. I charged it up. And so it says, find my device. It already found it. And then I've got a menu of like different, I guess, state changes that I would like to explore. So calm, create, explore, focus, mood, peace,
like
sleep.
categories, right?
Categories, right. Okay. And then So I like for some reason I often go into create, and then when I go into create, there's a menu of different sessions in there
Uh-huh.
that you can choose, and they each have their own music and different sort of soundscape and different patterns in the light. So I'm gonna put one on just because I can. I think. Let me see here. So here's people can hear the track a little bit.
Yeah, there's full brain signaling in the soundscape as well.
Okay.
We'll talk more about that.
So I don't think I can. I'm going to lose my mic if I put this on, but
Don't lose your mind, or maybe you can a little bit.
essentially, for those watching,
Eyes closed.
yeah, eyes closed. What you're seeing is just some white flashing lights in front of my face with this little visor that hangs over the eyes. What I'm seeing is, I mean, it changes. It's very dynamic, but right at the moment, it looks like a bunch of red lights that are flashing sort of like scallop shapes, like a cascade of scallop shapes. And now there's like gold and purple coming in. And I could go on and on and on. But what I find so fascinating about this, and just the brain in general and how it interprets data, is that the brain sees just kaleidoscopes and fractals and geometric patterns, and especially it's very colorful.
Yes.
Yet the actual lights, if you look at them like we just did, thank you, Brandon, for the fancy camera work there. You're our Tarantino. Now we got to flip it back to the beginning of the story. No. But I find that so interesting. I have another. Do you know about the Lucia light?
Yes, I do.
So I have a Lucia light over there. And yesterday, someone came over, and we were doing some EMF testing, and we were looking at the fields around all the electronics.
Sure.
And I put the guy under there. He lays under there, and immediately he goes, "Oh my God, there's all these rainbow colors and stuff. That's so cool that you have all these colored lights, right?" And me and the other guy sitting there were like, "No, it's all white light."
Yeah.
There's like a warmer tone halogen light in the middle and really bright white LEDs around the edges.
Yeah.
And I just thought, God, and the same with the NeuroVizr. It's just so cool what the brain will do if you give it a little bit of stimulation.
Okay, let's jump on an important point right there. And I'm totally in. Lucia is a beautiful device. The way it's designed, you know, the sound is usually called music. It's not music. Music per se is too attractive to the brain. The brain will always follow a predictable pattern. It's like cat and catnip.
Right. That's why we get a catchy song in our head.
There you
even
go.
Though we don't like it.
And it's there, right? So I do my best when I'm doing this style. It's like a four-piece rock band. I do the sound crafting first, and that's like the drummer and the bass player. They hold the shit together. Then I work with the light. I don't try to make the light do what the sound does. That's death in me, boredom. So predictable. It's a yawner. So to me, the soundscape I craft like drummer and bass player. The light is like lead guitar and vocalist. And if you're the producing and you're listening to separate tracks, the singer is definitely not trying to do what the drummer is doing, nor is the lead guitar trying to do what the bass, but they integrate. They integrate. So three things. I believe at first language level that what you want is an integration process. It has a higher level of meaning. It's an exponential meaning because the sound is doing something and the light, but together, famously from systems theory, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Now, and there are plenty of devices around where, I mean, there's like 25-year-old screensavers that do this, that when the sound goes bleep, the light goes flash. So they mirror each other. The brain is like, I get it.
Like what you see at a concert.
For example.
I just went and saw Roger Waters, a beautiful light show, video show, beautiful music. Yeah. Everything's perfectly synced, you know?
So the brain says, okay, I got it. Okay, that's interesting at first, but after a while, it's like, well, is that it? So to me, that's a low order manipulation when you do mirroring. Then you've got suggestions and different devices where they say, well, just flash the light and play any music that you want. Really? Go to a Cineplex. You're sitting watching a movie, and you're hearing the soundtrack of the movie next door. Dude, what do you think? This is like scrambled. It's like spaghetti on a wall.
That's funny.
Right?
But well, let me dig into that for a second.
Please.
To see if I'm,
because this is where advancement
okay,
is going and where things have been.
So, for example, and this kind of actually, I want to mention this earlier, going back to binaural beats and their limitations and brain entrainment and things like that. I don't know if you're familiar with NewCalm. It's a neuroacoustic software. I'll send you a podcast I did with their CEO.
Thank you. I don't know.
It's a neuroacoustic software that you listen to that, in a similar way to the tracks on your audio tracks, is not really music per se.
It's called mood. Technically, it's called mood framing.
Okay. Yeah. It's totally randomized, and it reliably encourages you into a really deep sort of theta state. It's just really good for recovery, right? Like a kind of an automated, guaranteed deep meditation is how I think of it. So I love it. It's 20 or 30 minutes.
Sure.
Anytime I'm really fatigued or I just want to rest or I really want to make sure that I actually have a solid meditation, I use NewCalm. Now, I'll combine that with that light.
Yes.
And even though they have nothing to do with one another, it has a really great, to me, compound effect where I'm able to disassociate from the body and kind of lose self. Default mode network goes to sleep. And then I get, this enrichment from the light experience. So it's almost, I think maybe, and they would probably be pissed if I minimize their technology to entrainment, because I don't think that's quite what it is. It's a bit more dynamic.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's a bit more dynamic.
Yeah.
But point being, I feel like I'm kind of mixing two worlds there just based on intuition and getting positive results. But what you described with being in one theater, seeing one visual, hearing the audio from next door, there's a discordant potential there.
Yeah.
And I've not found that, even listening to like a great, I don't know, mantra or shamanic track while I'm under that light.
Sure.
I seem to derive benefit, and I don't seem to get any sort of chaos happening.
Yeah. I think it is an understandable process. There's the brain will select. You don't realize, but the brain is definitely selecting. The brain always goes for predictability, for survival. It's an inescapable thing, unless you force it into destabilization. Right?
Right. Yeah.
Right. It's just like, here we go. I mean, you do a heavy dose, and it's like, strap on, here we go.
Yeah.
So I think that it is reliable but low in efficiency. I think to be honest, in my best shot, because I don't know that particular technology, but I understand this in principle. I've done this a lot in my life in different ways. So I think that it points towards a positive outcome. However, I think it, in likelihood, lacks efficiency in outcome. I think that the crafting that I explained, the methodology of sensory enrichment and these things, they are they're quite reliable, and the outcomes are, with repeatedness, with reinforcement, they're quite impressive, depending on the brain state you're starting with.
Sure.
So I think it works. I think that the brain is probably moving in and out of degrees of destabilization. And it's kind of randomized depending on which signal is attractive or dominant. Because if they're not integrated, it's like if you watch a badly dubbed movie, like, it's like, it's close, but you notice it.
Sure.
It doesn't ring true.
Yeah.
So I think it's real, it's effective, but it has a lower efficiency and sustained outcome. Because what we want is state, which is short term, with reinforcement to translate over into trait, which is long term. So it's not difficult to create short term states, attractive ones or unattractive ones. How well they are integrated into the neurology, because there are 4 predictable stages of neuroplastic change, and I can describe them. That the integration capacity into a long-term trait. Listen, help right now is fantastic. You're having a hard time and you want to feel better for a while. Fantastic. Longer term, the idea is to craft these states into a building block towards sustained traits. So there are new habits. Let's call them just new habits or new patterns. I'm guessing that process generates state, but may not, if because it's like, well, what's happening? What's the trait? What is it that my brain wants to know how to do? But that's just me theorizing.
Yeah.
It's attractive. There's nothing wrong with having a pleasant, positive experience. It's just what you expect from that. It's like you have a date with like, she was great, but you don't really see it going long term. There's nothing wrong with having a good time.
Right. Okay.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So, but safe to say, I guess, based on the fact that I'm not seeing any side effects or pathology result in me mixing these different mediums and modalities.
No.
But what we're talking about in terms of what the work that appeals to you that you're doing is really marrying the sound and the light together in a cohesive way, because the desired outcome is something different. It's this brain enrichment. It's the neuroplasticity. It's the trait change where over a period of time we're actually experiencing our reality.
That's fair.
In an uplifted manner.
I would say that's a fair
Whereas
assessment.
if I use a NeuCalm, and again, it might have benefits I'm unaware, but to me, it's just a beautiful recovery tool. In 20 minutes, I can get the equivalent of 3 or 4 hours sleep, is what it feels like.
Jump on it.
Which is awesome. But I don't know that it's necessarily, I'm not in some sort of psychedelic transcendent state either. I'm really just getting a deep rest and recovery.
Yeah, well, we probably won't this time get into entropic brain. But the more a person looks at either entropic brain or with Carhart getting together with Friston, which is like, two gods coming together in my mind, they came up with a model called the anarchic brain. Anarchy, literally anarchy, means without a leader. Right? And entropic means it goes into an entropic state of uncertainty. So they both have very unusual names. The anarchic brain will leave a base of order and go into disorder. It won't have a leader. And it seeks out information with open parameters. And then we'll try to select, and then hero's journey again, find something hopefully of importance that will assist it when it comes back and then integrates it into a higher order. It's that process. And you can tease at that process, but not really enter into the information zone. There's potential, there's promise, but it's like I think it's the efficiency outcome. Like physical exercise, the advancement in the technology. I had the chance in the past to work with a lot of athletes, gold medalists, and so on, and the understanding of how to get the most out of somebody's exercise is of strong. I mean, it really is a scientific principle at this point, at that higher level, and even at the common level. We understand. So my interest is in efficiency and maximizing, because in the past when I was more under practice, I would sometimes or even oftentimes get asked a question, what's the best kind of exercise? I say, listen, you got to do some exercise, get off your ass. Okay, well, what's the best kind of exercise? I said, well, that's easy. I said, it's not easy at all. They're all like, there's this, there's that. I said, it's easy. He said, bullshit. Just tell me. I said, the best kind of exercise is the one you're going to do.
Totally. That's true for me.
Right? Well, true for everybody, man.
Yeah.
So, like,
some people seem to really enjoy working out. I have many friends like that. They just love it. Oh, I can't wait to go to the gym. For me, there are few things I enjoy less than that.
There you go. That's why the secret sauce, dude.
Yeah,
the enjoyment part.
Yeah.
So it's to me it's like that it doesn't much matter. What you're going to do is the one that is going to give you the most benefit. All the rest is just theory.
Okay.
And you know what it's like, though. I mean, I don't know about you. You probably, because of your gig, probably, but there's a lot of stuff in closets gathering dust.
Yeah, for sure.
There's this honeymoon effect. Where and then the honeymoon is over and it's like,
Yeah. I think, I was observing this the other day because I've gone through many different practices of meditation,
Sure.
and I recently came back and resumed the Vedic meditation, kind of the mantra based.
Yes.
And Alice and I went and got sort of refreshed on that and started doing it. And as I started to do it over the past couple weeks, why did I ever stop? And it's like, there's not that there's anything wrong with it. I just needed novelty. So then I started listening to the Joe Dispenza guided meditations that in many cases were much longer and took me to these different kind of realms and things like that. But it was like the novelty, what I needed at any given time changed. There was a period where I just needed quiet and stillness for 20 minutes twice a day.
Yes.
And then that was not interesting to me, right? And I went on to other things like the NeuroVizr, something with some more bells and whistles, something that was more engaging and dynamic.
Here we are doing the dance.
Yeah, but I think a lot of it is. It's in our nature to allow ourselves to be malleable and follow what my meditation teacher Jeff Kober calls the charm.
Okay.
It's like that subtle intuitive hit where you're just being drawn into a new modality or practice or way of seeing things,
Well, let's call it adaptation to change.
Yeah, right? Yeah. But I do, to your point, definitely have a closet full of old, tools and toys that serve their purpose for a time, or I found something newer or better, and they kind of fall by the wayside and end up collecting dust somewhere. I don't perceive the NeuroVizr to being in that category, though. Again, it's new to me, so I'm really into it. I'm using it pretty much, I think, every day actually, especially because it's only 11 minutes.
Well, that's part of the thing. Is
I can take a break in the middle of my day without I'm going to go meditate, or like making a big production out of it.
Well, it's one of the reasons why I was so attracted to the basic neurology, that I wanted a good, solid hit for an effect. I very much believe in trying to achieve the most while doing the least.
Yeah, you and me both, brother.
All right. So,
something else to the point of this that I don't know if I mentioned when I did my little on-camera demo is that you use your own headphones.
Yeah.
So it's just the light device that goes on your head. Use your own headphones and you listen to that track. And I wanted to give you a kudos for something you did really well.
Tell me.
As someone who is an EMF awareness advocate, to say the least, meaning total tinfoil hatter.
Yeah.
I get so annoyed when somebody comes out with a really meaningful and useful technology that exposes you to undue levels of EMF or blue light or whatever the thing they're doing wrong. Now, when I first got this, I thought that, because you activate it with Bluetooth, I thought the whole time you're wearing it that your brain is getting bathed in Bluetooth. And I don't like that at all, but I really liked using it.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, cost to benefit ratio, I'm sure I'm benefiting more from this experience than I am taking a hit for 11 minutes of Bluetooth on my head. But then when I asked you about it, you're like, no, the Bluetooth just pings, it turns on, and then it turns off.
Yeah.
Because I was going to ask you, man, you guys got to put airplane mode on this. The Aura Ring, the Happy, the Apollo, really great device I use. All these great tools. They know they're going to market to biohackers and they want it to be safe and all that. So I was really happy to hear that you guys had the foresight to eliminate the EMF issue, so it's just all benefit.
Yeah, we were chit-chatting a little bit. I'm a wire guy. I'm way old school that I like wires. Here's a wire, and I'm happy that there's a wire. Why not?
Yeah.
So I'm okay with that. And so up front, you need Wi-Fi, you need Bluetooth. But if you don't like Wi-Fi, you open the device. You got the app. You can go to the App Store, and the app is free. You can download the app on your phone, and you can listen to you can use all the soundscapes for all the. It's all
that's
there.
right, huh?
It's free.
Yeah, I forgot. I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, it's like, that's free. How does it cost? Nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And if you want to have the full integrated experience, then you buy the headset. That's cool.
Got it.
So with Wi-Fi, and you have a phone, because now the app is on your phone. If you don't want to use Wi-Fi, you want to go camping, or you're in a shit zone or something, you can download all the sessions into your phone. Then you don't need Wi-Fi anymore. Then you've got the headset, and you want to connect to the headset, so the Bluetooth thing. But you select, and it's a flash Bluetooth. It's like, I don't even know how many milliseconds. It's done. Now there's no more Bluetooth at all. And you say go, and you get the sound from your phone, and you're happy to ride.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing that right.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, some people sometimes send me different products and stuff, and I'm like, it's cool, but they want me to promote it or whatever, or be on the podcast. There was one, and I'm not going to shit on them, but it was some kind of HRV monitor that went around your chest, and it was really compelling because it gave you real time data about your HRV and different biometrics and such. But because it's in real time, it needs Bluetooth to communicate to the app, right? So you're putting like a Bluetooth sensor directly on your heart. And I'm just like, guys, with all due respect, it might not be that bad, but just fundamentally
it might be
goes against my, the electro, nature of the human body and such. So anyway,
I hear you.
I'm glad we got to cover that, because I know anyone listening that's savvy to EMFs can be like, yeah, but what about the Bluetooth? So, and to your point of using Wi-Fi to actually download the tracks, we don't even have Wi-Fi in this house.
Oh.
And I just use my cell signal to download the tracks when I use it.
Cool.
So you don't even need
but are they permanently in your phone now?
No.
That's if you go to.
So I got to go on Wi-Fi if I want to download them and save them.
You, the little buttony thing in the top, you touch and it says offline mode.
Got it.
And if you click offline mode, it goes check. Then it opens up and you have an option, download all.
Done. Okay.
And you press it and you see.
Perfect.
And then that's it. You own them.
Okay, good. While we're at it,
there
was something I wanted to ask you too, and I'm sure others who explore this thing will have the same question.
Sure.
There's a menu on the bottom underneath the play button that has breathing.
Yeah.
What is that? Because I've pressed it and then I'm like, am I missing something?
Yes, you're missing Wi-Fi.
Okay, that's what. Okay. All right.
Because
I'm kind of waiting for something to happen. I'm like, is there supposed to be a guided breathwork thing on here?
It's real subtle. Because you have choices.
Okay.
The only way we can enable right now is that through Wi-Fi you're connected to the server.
Got it.
Right. I said earlier, trying to give it credibility, that the real effect neurologically begins when the light sound ends.
Sure.
And like the saying goes, don't eat and run. I try to encourage when it ends, I say, just feel your body, and I thought, screw it. I'm just going to put in some traditional, well-founded breathing applications. So assuming you're on Wi-Fi, because it has to get from the server, you choose one. I have the typical HRV. I've got some of the anxiety, the balancer box breathing, real classic stuff.
Yeah.
And you when the thing light and sound stops, automatically hear a gong. Cool.
Yeah.
Right. But a bing, 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 bing. So you follow the tones in the breathing.
Okay.
And
I actually heard those tones this morning after my second session. I left it on and I heard what you just described.
Okay, well, somehow you got into the server.
Okay.
Yeah, somehow.
Okay.
The one is they're really helpful. The other is if you really want to max out the effect of the light sound experience, you give it some digestion time, some integration time. And the breathing not only gives you the time, like you sit your ass down and do it, but also, of course, the breathing is well known to help autonomically to integrate neurological stimulation.
Cool.
So
I like that.
It's good.
I'm all about the integration.
Yeah.
Another thing that I find really cool about this is its portability.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, the Lucia Light. I love that. It's great. But you could take it all apart and put it in a little briefcase, but I never do it. I don't bring it on airplanes.
Yeah.
Last trip I took to Colorado, actually, I put this in a little case.
Yeah.
1 second to fold it, zip it up, throw it in my suitcase, super light.
Yeah.
It's badass for portability.
Okay, I'm gonna.
Which a lot of this stuff is not, and a lot of it's way more expensive. I think your thing's around $14.95, something like that.
Yeah.
That Lucia Light's like $8,500. The big one's $25,000 or something.
Right. My new car.
It's like, it's like who can afford that?
Yeah. Well, okay. Spoiler alert. We're working hard right now. You can show Fat Boy. Then I'm going to tell you something you don't know about Fat Boy. Fat Boy is a nickname because you'll see why. He's a little bit thicker. So, we make up stupid names, right?
Yeah. So for those listening, he brought the new.
So you see.
The new iteration.
So you see like
of
that,
the device. Right.
So, you know, you keep on learning. I mentioned to Luke in the beginning, we really tried the eco ethic. We 3D print, we do local, we hire local in Thailand, and you know, we started off with biodegradable material and it kept on breaking. But anyway, here's Fat Boy, and what the hell? It's my company, so I can do what I want, right? So, what we're working on right now, we've been working with Harman Human on designs, you know, great design firm. Let's call this the light. This is like to my partners. Trust me, it's okay. That let's call this the light box. We're working right now on a simple magnetic coupling. So you go right now, you got a light box. So any design that you want, you just couple it on. Or let's say that you have a stationary thing like over your bed or a treatment table or something. You just take it and magnetically couple it to that,
cool.
and it works no matter
Right, so a practitioner could put it over someone's eyes while they're doing whatever
so nothing
things.
touches their head.
Yeah, yeah.
Then but it still works the same. It works
Right.
exactly the same,
Right.
and you can just uncouple and couple it
That's a
any
cool
way you
idea.
want. Yeah, so
I like the I don't know if I've ever seen anything or knowingly seen anything that's 3D printed, but I
Yeah.
like the feel of this.
Oh, yeah?
Like, it looks all, like, laser cut, you know?
Well,
It's
you know, I can't
it's
tell you.
cool. I
That's
think it's neat.
so we screwed up so many times. If you'd seen where we started to where we are right now, it's like,
How many iterations before the Fat Boy?
I don't know, 15. I don't even remember.
A lot.
A lot. A lot.
One thing I wanted to ask you about I wanna call them music tracks, but as you said, it's not really music in the
Let's call them
traditional sense.
soundscapes.
Soundscapes.
Yeah.
How are you actually like, who's making them? You have, I don't know, a couple dozen or something on there in the app,
Yeah.
I think. I mean,
Yeah,
is that you in a music editing software thing with the didgeridoo and some rattles, you know, like
I wish. No, you know, there are libraries of these loops.
Okay.
And I've, you know, I have a lot of them. You can buy them. And most of them are crap. You know, it's like some kind of evil space lord attacking antelopes. I don't know what they're trying to do. But
Right.
if you spend time, and so what, I mean, the process is pretty simple okay, like right now, if we're gonna, hey, let's make one. What do you want to make? You know, it's like if we were musicians or playwrights. You know, what do you want to make? Something. I mean, make one up. What would you like to do? What would be the theme of a new session? What would you like to make?
You asking me?
Yeah,
I would say it would be around the element of water.
water. Okay, that's not difficult. And what's the state that you?
Oh, the state. Okay.
Yeah.
Hyper creativity.
Hyper creativity. Okay, so the first thing you do, well, you have the backlog of knowledge about brainwave states. Let's assume you have that, right? I have that, right? And then you say, okay, the very first thing I want to do is I want to create a mood frame, an emotional tone that would complement hyper creativity. What would that sound like? What would a hyper creative sound like? So you go through and you search around and you say, "Oh, that's close, but not really." Is oh fuck, pardon me. I get it. Yeah, right. You say, "Yeah," is it? Yeah, that's good. That's real good. And then you have like two or three others. Then you go and you say, "Okay, that one." That's where you start because this stuff has to have an emotive quality because we're not thinking creatures that feel. We're feeling creatures that think. And that's really important in terms of communicating.
Can you say that again?
Yeah, we are not, I'll try. We are not thinking creatures that feel. We are feeling creatures that think.
Huh.
That's the whole thing of bottom up as opposed to top down.
Okay.
Most neuroplastic techniques come top down. They are more conceptual. The bottom up, which is where I play, is more perceptual, more perception than cognition. So that's first language, that place.
Got it. That's really interesting, and that brings to mind principles of manifestation or laws of attraction, wherein just thinking about it would be top down, right?
Yes.
Intellectualizing all the ways
Yeah,
it could
yeah,
work, won't
yeah,
work, should
yeah.
work,
Yeah.
rumination, it does nothing.
Yeah.
Maybe if there's a little intention behind it, you might get somewhere, but where the magic is, or the secret sauce, as
Yep.
you would call it on
Yep.
item 4 earlier.
And 5. Right.
Yeah, 5 and the other one.
Yeah.
Is the feeling that
Okay.
what that thing that we desire would
Yeah.
invoke, right?
Yeah.
And invigorating ourselves with the feeling
Yeah.
almost prior to the cognition of how to do it, when, where, how,
Yeah.
who, all that.
Yeah. This bottom up is what the entropic brain and all, they talk about that as being primary consciousness. Primary consciousness. This is Aldous Huxley and Henri Bergson and all these guys, where the brain is a reducing valve organism. That it begins, that the early consciousness was like uncertain and wild with all sorts of sensory perceptual load, and it's like, wow, it's kind of a tripping world. And then bit by bit, a secondary element comes in that starts to control and suppress that to make it more practical. So in entropic brain, there's primary consciousness, secondary consciousness, and there's this zone in between called criticality. So there's this up and down, and you can get into primary consciousness super fast, bottom up, perceptual, instead of top-down conceptual. Like guided imagery where somebody's talking and you're walking along and they're saying all kinds of nice things and good. That's a cognitive top-down process. And I'll have a bunch of that too. Why not? However, the potency of a bottom-up perceptual, not conceptual, perceptual, where it doesn't have a meaning. It is its own meaning. You understand? Like top down has a meaning.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean by that? Well, like, what is the meaning of blue? Like, I show you blue, and you say, well, what does that mean? It's blueness. Just experience it. Like Stanislav Grof, right? The only way to have an experience is to experience the experience.
What you're describing also brings to mind perhaps why religious conversion experiences or transcendent experiences can be so profoundly life-changing without necessarily much cognition involved at all, right? It's a being state of experience that can turn an ardent atheist into a religious scholar. You know what I mean?
Well,
right?
I call this stuff knowing without thinking.
Right. Okay. That's good.
Knowing without, it's like, I got it. Yeah, but I can't explain it.
I had an experience a couple years ago with the bufo toad, the 5-MeO-DMT.
Okay. That'll experience.
And I've been studying, loosely non-duality and Eastern mysticism, and it's benefited my life a lot from just trying to create kind of a meaning and a framework where everything makes sense. That there's this
that would be nice
omniscient force of creation that we call God, and it manifests itself in all spectrums of known reality so that it can experience itself, right? I mean, there's this kind of fundamental things that are understood from a certain worldview. And I can intellectually understand that, but I had an experience specifically where I experienced that, right? And that was infinitely more life-changing and potent than me reading 1,000 books that explained it intellectually, no matter how thorough and eloquent they might have been. Right? It's like seeing, feeling, being, experiencing why creation exerts the effort to experience itself in infinite ways, including all the ways that we would perceive on one spectrum of duality to be bad, evil, wrong, dark, abhorrent, right? It's like, no, it all has to be here in order for this thing to work.
Right.
And so having the richness of that experience of feeling that in my bones changed the trajectory of my life forever.
Well, that's the beauty to me of direct bottom-up sensory, and it's just like boom, and there it is. Then
there's no way of unknowing it.
No, it's like it happened.
Or unbelieving it.
Well, because you couldn't believe it into existence anyway. You can't believe it out of existence.
Right. It's kind of like there's this great reality that exists, and it's going to exist whether or not we have access to it or not. And once we get access, it's not like something has to be gained. It's just you're acknowledging something that was already in existence.
Well, I think that this is the thing, that our brain, not even our whatever the mind is, or soul or spirit or whatever, our actual organ, the brain, is built to be able to let go and access this for periods of time. It's built for it. Again, I'll repeat something from the beginning. Because a state is uncommon does not make it abnormal. But we're in such a rationalist, materialistic, scientific philosophy that there is an innate resistance or fear in the irrational. It's got to be rational. Well, welcome to the hero's journey, my friend.
I love it.
Because the thing, ordinary experience, then you feel more, it's like, I got to change, and then you resist it. I mean, this is classic hero's journey. You can read Campbell, all of it. And then say, ordinary, got to change, I don't want to change. Then some influence, a mentor or something, kicks you over the line, and you go into the underworld. You go into the entropic brain, into that primary consciousness. And then you experience challenges and trials and allies and enemies and discoveries and something important, and then you value it, and then you take it into yourself. Then you come back home again with what you had. Now you got it. And now you give it to others. Hero's journey. Dead on.
Wow.
Dead on.
I want to let people know that are listening that are like, I want to check out this NeuroVizr thing. You can get $100 off this bad boy, and I highly recommend it. For those that can afford it.
Sure.
Even with $100 off, it's considerable investment for some people. I think personally worth it. You can go to neurovizr.com. That's NeuroVizr, neurovizr.com. And your code there that you guys so generously offered, and thank you for that, is Luke100.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure to get that in during the conversation.
Sure.
So I listen to podcasts. I'm like, yeah, where's that thing? I want the thing. So there you go for those interested.
We should have started off with that.
Yeah, right. Big sales pitch. Hey, Sunday, big sale today only. I was wondering when you talked about the future version of this where you're going to have the magnetic piece and you can take it off.
That's our intent. We're working on it now.
Down the road.
There's always weird, dumb stuff.
Well, I mean, personally, I don't think you need to do it. It'd be cool for some people, but it works just fine the way it is.
Okay.
But what I was wondering is, have you been able to do any research, in terms of the brain waves and the different states and stuff? And the reason I thought of the magnet thing, and I thought, I don't know if they could do a QEEG with this thing on your head because of all the wires and sensors and all that. Have you guys done any
beginning?
You're starting to do that?
Okay. Here's Cookie the dog.
Yeah, I love when she comes up.
That's good. The two things. We are in the midst right now of, a couple of specific studies using the device and planning a few. However, I have to say that essentially everything, let's be conservative and say 90% of everything that is there is based on solid pre-existing research. So I'm not like blowing this stuff out of different orifices or something. Let's try this for a while. That's why I'm able to describe enrichment and priming processes and neuroplasticity and the periods of time, because the research is there. If anybody's motivated and you can get through the language in some of it, I mean, for me, it's like a page turner fascination. I love it. It exists, and some of it is only like brand new, hot off the press. Some research on the network harmonics of the brain networks. When I saw that, it was like, oh, are you kidding me? Here it is. And so I programmed sessions to reinforce the limbic network and the executive control and default mode network. And it's like, well, I mean, it's like a candy store. Here's all of the information. Well, okay. Let me use it, program it.
Awesome. And with the element of light, I've heard this type of light therapy, I guess, for lack of a better term, be called hypnagogic light.
Yeah.
Would what you're doing be classified as that to you?
Sort of. Hypnagogic.
Hypnagogic.
And hypnopompic.
Like logic.
Yeah.
Gogic. Okay.
Gadget. That's funny. okay, I have tradition training in Tibetan or Vajrayana Buddhism and so on, and they call this the fourth state. Break it down. We have two basic states. You're awake or you're asleep. In the sleep state, you have this thing called sleeping dreams. In the waking, you have this thing called waking dreams. That's the fourth state. We basically have forgotten about this fourth state. It is fundamentally required for an organism to experience this state every circadian cycle. It's a psychic nutrient. And it naturally occurs in the transition from waking to sleep, that's the hypnagogic, and from sleeping to wake, that's the hypnopompic. But that's not restricted there. That just happens, even though most of us have no idea, we don't pay attention to it. Many people have been aware of its creative potential. It's crazy. I mean, there are a lot of famous ones like Edison. He used to hold ball bearings in his hand and zone, or whatever you want to call it, and then when they would fall, he was trying to teach himself to be in that state. And Dolly used to use keys and on, so this thing called hypnagogic or hypnopompic, let's just say hypnagogic, when you go from wake to sleep, is evidence of a normative aspect of the brain, and that you can learn how to do that during any part of your waking state. The trick is, why it's in that transition time, the trick is the access point is deep, conscious relaxation. Most of us don't have that ability. When we begin to relax more deeply, we lose consciousness. So this is something, the big thief in my mind, modern electricity is the big thief, because throughout millennia, many of our human existence, we've spent great amounts of time awake in the dark.
Oh, interesting.
We don't spend time awake in the dark.
That's interesting because I always think of peoples of antiquity as having a fire. Maybe they're staying up till 9 p.m. Then everyone goes to sleep and wakes up with the sun. Like I picture them like humans just following the sun cycle, the solar cycle, essentially, right?
But even before I'm going to sleep now, there are periods of extended darkness, and you've heard of the prisoner's cinema?
No.
Yeah, prisoner. Okay, this is from. There are many versions of this, but when people would put in like dungeons, and you're there, and you're awake for a long period, and there's little or no light much of the time, they would either eyes open or closed. They would see all of this displayed, like the NeuroVizr.
Oh, right.
And so they would wait, and that was their entertainment. First there are phosphenes, like little, and then you go into the entopic. The entopic is like, these are colors I've never seen before. Then you get the geometry and all the dimensionality. Then if you hang there long enough, then it's the open sesame. You get eidetic, where you start to see, places and people and scenes and the whole thing. So the sensory deprivation is one of the ways to access primary consciousness, the psychedelic zone. And it was, famous so much so that it has this name, the prisoner cinema, that they would just wait. They would be awake in the dark, and the brain starts to populate itself with all of these redundant feedback cycles, and all these things start to happen. And there you are.
Wow, this must be, I guess, the same phenomenon as these darkness retreats. My friend and fellow Austinite, Aubrey Marcus, was telling me about one of these. I think he made a documentary about it. I don't know if it's come out yet, but he said that, I don't know if this is what he perceived to be happening or what's happening, but he said it was like a DMT trip. Essentially, after a couple of days, you're tripping balls.
Well, this is the point, that our brain has the capacity to do this, and it's not a malfunction. DMT may be involved or not involved. The brain is neurologically capable of letting go of restricted network relationships for periods of time, normally, naturally, and positively. So the hypnagogic, to me, it's a reference, but it's a restrictive reference because the thought is, well, that's that transition time. No, it works because you begin to move into deep relaxation, but you're still semi-conscious. Well, you can learn to be fully conscious. So you can have your sleeping dreams and your waking dreams. When these waking dreams start to become more lucid, what does lucid mean? It has two meanings: full of light, but it also means clear perception. Like if you're in the hospital, they want to check, is he lucid? Do you know your name? Do you know the time of what day it is? Like sometimes I don't know what day it is, so I got a problem. But like, are you lucid? So when you start to have lucid waking dreams, if you can drop into deep conscious relaxation, that is not the goal, but that's the gateway. That's the gateway. And if you can pass through that gate, what's on the other side of that is all the stuff you want. That's where it lives.
That's the juice.
That's the juice. So when you start to have the ability for lucid waking dreams, guess what happens to your sleeping dreams? They start to become lucid. The lucidity, the clear perception that I am having this experience is a normative, skillful process that you can develop in the brain. Hence the dream yogas and all these things that are in the traditions that I practiced throughout my life. It's like, oh, there it is. And we, basically not even aware in a common sense. And the other is we're not encouraged. You know, as kids can do this, but we don't encourage it. And they kind of unlearn to do it. It's normal. It's normal. Call it fantasizing, call it imagine, drop in and you can see, you know, people sometimes ask me, how do you know what to do with how do you know how to make these things? I call it light choreography. Well, one is I study my ass off, but the other is the truth. We all want the truth, don't we? The truth is many of the kind of what I'll call insights that I get on how to do it come while I'm doing it.
Oh, right. Right. I just had an idea.
What's that?
We need to make a waterproof NeuroVizr so you can take it in a float tank.
I'll put that on my to-do list.
But no, seriously, and not. But I was thinking about just thinking about the darkness retreats and these different stages that you go through. There's those access points to deeper levels of consciousness. And and when you were talking, I was like, oh, I've experienced that in float tanks.
Sure,
man.
Deprivation.
The sensory deprivation. 20 minutes, 30 minutes into it, all of a sudden you got no body anymore.
DHL or FedEx.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, here's the thing that's important. I'll bring up because we're talking about these things, and also Lucia, gorgeous device. This design is complex, and it may not seem it, but there are so many optometric parameters built into this that won't happen if you have like sunglass goggles, or won't happen with Lucia or any other kind of similar distance device. When this thing is flickering, actually, it's not product pitch. This is important stuff. This is advancement right now in the technology. That there are 3 levels of optometric signaling going on simultaneously: macro, meso, and micro.
Really?
Yeah.
Within the lights?
Within this design with the lights.
Okay.
Right? So that the distance this is from the retina, the height, what's the bottom of the bottom of the height, and the left and the right, peripheral, are within the visual field with rotating eyes.
Oh.
Right? Because the whole thing, like when somebody is like looking up or looking down, I can control's too strong. I can strongly influence the general neurological autonomic state just by where the lights are. Forget about the flickering thing. Just what lights are turning on where.
Oh.
Okay, like in standard meditation, well, most traditions, if you're sitting and you're not doing a Vedic, mantra, if the mind starts to become overactive, the guidance is roll your eyes down, look down, and that'll calm the overactivity cognitively. If you start to get dopey and doze off, even with your eyes closed, roll your eyes up, and that triggers stimulation. So I can have the lights moving up or moving down in cascades depending on what state I'm seeking. Also, and this is some of the secrets, I won't say more, these are my secrets, but the direction of rotation, because sometimes you'll see the lights sort of like they're not just, they're moving around. That directionality in dynamics also is a strong influence on the nervous system. And even like in EMDR techniques, right? Eye desensitivity, that thing, right? I do that with the lights purposely. It's a destabilization that desensitizes the amygdala. That's all built into here.
That's crazy.
It's like, and there's like, that's 20%.
That's so cool.
Right? So that's the macro signaling.
Okay.
Even if the lights weren't flickering, it would work.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Well, there's an interesting effect. I'm glad we started talking about the lights because I wanted to ask you about this.
Yeah.
There's a very novel effect that I get when I'm using the NeuroVizr.
Yeah.
If I pay attention to it and just am really present to my experience, there's like this percolating sensation in my, I don't know, in my frontal lobe or forehead, right? Where it's like, you can just feel it firing to the point where I haven't had anyone look at it, but I feel like you would see the skin moving, like on the outside of my skull.
Yeah, maybe.
That's how pronounced it is. There's like a twitching going on in the brain. And to the point of that, the enjoyment, I really like how it feels. So as I start to notice it, I almost, and I'm not forcing it at all, but I'm putting a little attention on it and just maybe gently encouraging that to do what it's doing. And I feel like there's some sort of hemispheric synchronization or some parts of my brain are lighting up that are physically
it is
discernible.
And the more you do it, the more your brain knows how to dance to these things. It gets better and better and better and better.
Do you think that there is any kind of hemispheric synchronization going on?
I don't know. I don't pursue it.
Okay.
I don't pursue it. So I don't know. The honest answer is don't know. I'm going to finish this on the quickie because I'm proud of it, and also it's a big difference on when you ask about comparison of different devices.
Sure.
I don't say anybody's device is bad. Everybody's device does what it does.
Yeah.
End of story.
Yeah.
I described the macro. There's also mesopulsing, because the understanding more and more is that all of the frequency elements of the brain are in resonant relationship with the pulsing in the body, like breathing rates, heart rates, peristaltic rates, blood pressure, craniosacral, that you can't have this cacophony of frequencies, that they want to exist in different harmonic relationships. So I have mesopulsing that is more somatic. These are the pulse rates that you dance to. You can't dance to 20 hertz, 20 times a second. You can't move that fast unless you're on meth, right? So in here, there are times when I'll insert, while the macro is happening, I'll insert pulsing. And that pulsing works so that the experience starts to resonate whole body and not just cranial.
Oh, wow.
Then there's the micro flickering, and that flickering, there are so many things going on there, that a particular frequency, 18 hertz, 12 hertz, is like a musician talking about a note. It's context. Dog, cat, bites. Dog bites cat. Cat bites dog. Same three words, two different meanings. So the sequencing, the rate of change. Then there's this thing called latency, where I can change this at an absolute rate, but the brain cannot process at an absolute rate. There's a latency. So whatever signal happens here, depending on how quickly I move it, that signal bleeds into the next signal, bleeds into the next signal, and what you have is you have a novel signal emerge that is neither one nor the other. It's the product, it's the baby of these two. And it goes on and on and on. Part of it is like a screenplay. Like if you write a screenplay for a movie and you want to bring up more of that character's qualities, what's the conventional tool in screenwriting? It's super easy. You create some kind of conflict. When that character experiences a conflict, you right?
Or when you start dating someone and you're in the honeymoon phase,
Yeah.
and you think you know who they are
Yeah.
until there's a conflict, and probably them
Yeah.
of you as well.
Right.
You know, to be
Go
fair.
traveling, check it
Yeah.
out. Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, I purposely introduce conflict, destabilization at certain times because of the way that the brain will want to come back, because the brain wants to recognize, it wants to know. So I say, whoa, whoa, and it's like, what? What about this? Oh, you kind of create an appetite for the signal. So just going back, not critically, but brain entrainment has none of this.
Mm-hmm.
None. And this is a domain of exploration that is, to me, it is, in the best of senses, psychedelic. It is mind manifesting experience. And you've got to exercise. I say sometimes that the visor is brain exercise disguised as entertainment, kind of like Zumba for the brain.
That's really well said, actually, because as you were explaining that, how you kind of embed the sense of novelty in there.
Yeah.
I was thinking about, I just actually really enjoy my sessions with this, right? I mean, I find I always know where this is in the house, which is usually in my office because that's where I spend most of my time in the daytime.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not like even with meditation, which I love the benefits of it, but I don't know that I'm ever really excited to stop what I'm doing at 4 PM and shut everything down when especially when there's some inertia at play.
Yeah.
It's like, I gotta meditate.
Yeah.
Yet I've never ended a meditation being like, oh, that was a waste of time. Shouldn't have done that. Literally, never.
Yeah.
But I'm not drawn to it in the same way where it's like a juicy reward. Like, ooh, there's a piece of candy I know in the cupboard. I'm gonna go eat it, and then I do, and I know where it is. That's what my experience of your tech has been. It's just like, well, where's that thing? I'm kind of craving that experience.
Yeah.
Which of course is the brain craving that experience, and maybe it's more so because there are some novel elements with that latency and those parts baked in that keeps your brain out of that totally predictable pattern.
Yeah. In free energy principle and all these elegant brain theories right now, Anil Seth in his book, it leans heavily on it as a materialist. The theory really simply is that the brain is very good at prediction, that it wants shortcuts. That when I walk through my yard up in the mountains, I look down and I see a snake, and I look again and it's a garden hose, right? That the brain builds these things called priors. And literally, at least at a neurological level, our brain is always jumping to conclusions.
Got that right.
It always jumps to a conclusion. Why? Because there's too much energy demand to have every experience be totally virgin. Right? So in this theory, they say that the brain will do everything it can to reduce surprise. Like when you walk down the stairway, you don't want to be surprised that your stairway turned into a boa constrictor. Like that would be a surprise, which of course can happen in a certain brain state, right? I mean, famously, Woodstock, when Carlos Santana is playing, do you know that story? Yeah. If you know the Woodstock, you know some of the stuff that Santana was scheduled to go on later, right? But then it got kicked up. But before the schedule got changed, Hendrix gave Carlos a very heavy hit of mescaline. So he went on stage and he was peaking when he was playing the set.
Oh my God.
And that while he's peaking, his guitar is turning into a boa constrictor and he's playing this snake through, probably the most famous Santana song of all from Woodstock. So anyway, so the brain supposedly for survival does its best to minimize surprise. And yet, And yet, this is my challenge to their theory, we delight in certain qualities of surprise, of novelty, humor, and just the wow, look at that of art, or looking into the baby's eyes, and it's like you go, right? So I think the brain for Darwinian survival seeks to avoid surprise by being predictive. But when it comes right down to it, we just have to let loose and discover and delight in the uncommon in order to not be insane.
Well, that brings me to my last question, and that was in regard to fourth state deficiency syndrome.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's like perfect segue. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Well, that's another, like I think that many of the conditions that we suffer are because we lack time spent in the lucid waking dream, or whatever you want to call it, the fourth state. I think that we fundamentally have a fourth state deficiency. It's like a person's a vegan and they're not doing any B12 supplementation, and they feel like shit no matter what therapy they do or what they're just like, they take the B12, it's like, oh, I feel better. So I think that because it's biologically imprinted in our circadian cycle, if you don't let a person wake up, they're going to have a problem. If you don't let a person sleep, they got a problem. If you don't let a person dream, they got a problem. But if a person doesn't have these are just words, right? The waking dreams. They're not even what do you mean by dream, but that thing that is on the other side of deep conscious relaxation, where you can stay consciously awake and be like deeply relaxed, especially in the dark. If you don't spend time there, you're going to experience a syndrome that I call fourth state deficiency syndrome. And one of the very first manifestations or symptoms of this syndrome is disturbed sleep, because you have a disturbed circadian cycle. A very fundamental element of information processing is not happening. You have the rational mind, you've got some sleeping dreams, but you don't have you don't have this revelry of creative, information-rich exploration that is psychically a nutrient.
Yeah.
It's a nutrient.
So true.
I got to say, to finish the thought up, that one of the most common feedbacks that I get, and this is like, no matter what sessions they're using, one of the most common feedbacks I get is normalizing sleep.
Really?
Yes. With regular use, people that don't sleep, or like a PTSD, that kind of thing, or just the insomnia, right? They say, thank you. I haven't slept since medical school like I'm sleeping now.
Wow.
And I think
even if it just did that, you would win.
It's not a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, and I'm not making it up. I'm kind of, maybe I am making it up, but that I think that this fourth state deficiency syndrome is, to use the word, is epidemic or pandemic in urban societies. And however you're able to get close to that and taste that, the circadian cycle itself, which is fundamental to health and well-being, starts to, it's like, if you don't get enough sleep, I don't care what therapies you're doing, they're not going to work well.
100%.
Right?
Yeah, so, especially as you get older, I've found.
Well, and you will find increasingly, my prediction.
Damn.
So, yeah, I know. So my thought is, well, I think we have a deficiency syndrome.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at, ancient cultures, indigenous cultures, and probably even the very few that persist as kind of hunter-gatherer lifeway folks out there, in the depths of the Amazon or wherever they might still be able to be allowed to exist. But the ritual, the ceremony, dance, fire, entheogenic substances, God knows what people, breathing techniques, all the rituals, all the things, right? All the different cultures seem to all share in that they value that state as you put it, as a nutrient. It's a coming of age. It's a rite of passage.
Yeah.
All of these artifacts of these various cultures
Yeah.
are centered around that.
Yeah.
And you're so right that in our, and I, I have no problem with capitalism. It seems to be the best we've come up with. I'm sure
Yeah.
we could do better. But let's just say, Western capitalist society, get to the front of the line, get an education, make a bunch of money, and die
Yeah,
with a bunch of
yeah,
toys, that
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
thing,
yeah.
No rest for the wicked, sleep is for when
Yeah.
you're dead. This kind of mentality, right? The competitive nature of our culture doesn't place any value on what you're speaking
No,
to.
you're nuts
Yeah.
if you go there.
Yeah, it's
we
like,
used to praise them. They were the seers, the prophets,
right.
the shamans. And now it's like, he's schizophrenic.
Well, this is also, in our culture too, something that I think is a huge problem, especially in relation to cultures that have been at least socially and psychologically successful in the past, is that we totally denigrate the elderly, right? There's really no place for
Yeah.
elder wisdom here. Elderly people are, generally speaking, or there are exceptions, shoved away into nursing homes, and they're a bother to us rather than, rather than the richness of their experience. And even myself, when I was younger, I mean, I didn't have much interest in my grandparents' points of view. Right?
Yeah.
I want to go listen to Zeppelin and ride my skateboard. I don't want to hear about your philosophy, right?
Yeah.
Now, as I'm getting a little older. I talk to a guy like you that's 20 some years older than me, and I'm like, man, give me that wisdom.
Yeah.
I would rather talk to you, someone with life experience and earned wisdom, than I would, no offense, your average 20-year-old that thinks they have life figured out and knows relatively little about what the game is all about.
Okay.
So I think you're so right in that we're missing that nutrient, and then the carriers of that wisdom and the beneficiaries of that nutrient that have practiced it perhaps more than us are just kind of shoved away and ignored.
Well, I feel like I'm a 22-year-old, 73-year-old.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate assessment.
Okay, two things.
Yeah.
Original mind machine. Well, let's call this a mind machine because we would call them that in the 70s and the 80s. The original mind machine was fire. Because with normal fuel, the average fire, even the campfire or the fireplace, it flickers in and around the 10 hertz rate. It's the original alpha stabilizer.
Really?
Yeah, flickering fire.
Wow.
Fire flickers. Hello? It's like, and what was the light that we had the only time in the dark caves and the periods? And what would you stare at? And then you look into it, and then you could use like a crystal ball where if you can pass that critical zone and go into primary consciousness, then you start to see visions and forecasts and everything. So the fire was the first mind machine. Second thing is a caution or a warning or something that's freaking me out. I'm not quite sure how to deal with it, but I'll call it the consumerism of consciousness, where awareness just becomes a product. And that's, I would say, our biz, what you do and what I do. I think we have to be really sensitively aware that we don't turn all of this into just another consumer tilted product that we're trying to sell.
Right. I mean, that's the trick when I think about the psychedelic industry, or at least what's emerging as an industry, right? Such a positive thing, but also a double-edged sword when something finding God becomes a commodity that can be monetized, then it gets kind of sticky.
So let's make let's make an agreement to be cautious.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you very much,
man.
For
sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I thought I was done with questions, but you made me think of one when you talked about sleep.
Yeah.
There's a track in your app that for sleep, right? Or maybe it's even a category.
It's a category.
Yeah, and then there's a few tracks within that.
Yeah.
And me, as someone who's not only really into the EMF stuff, but blue light, I'm like, this thing makes blue light. It's flickering, flashing. And even though your eyes are closed, I thought, oh man, if I do this, it's gonna shut down my melatonin production and actually activate me and make me alert. But of course, I'm a good beta tester. I tried it and it had no negative impact on sleep whatsoever. And I think even did help me fall asleep on a couple of occasions.
I use it for jet lag. I wake up in the middle of the night and I do a session and there are two that are specific, although many of them are useful. The one called Sleep Angel is more of a sleep training.
I did that one last night.
It's a sleep training, and it could have been called, because I make up the names, right? Yeah. It could have been called Learning How to Let Go.
Okay.
Because many people don't have the sleep in a positive way because all day they're building up attention and a charge, and they're not. They're supposed to say, "Okay, now I'm going to let go of everything." They can't let go of everything. So the idea is a sleep training where you can do it during the day, and you'll find that sleep comes more easily. Deep sleep is more of a sleep induction, and I'll take a risk because it's not really true. It's more like a sleeping pill. So it's more induces it, more kind of makes your brain want to shift, where Sleep Angel lets you learn how to let go, and the two relate to each other very nicely
Oh, cool.
in that way.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just found it fascinating that having a blue light on my face didn't keep me awake. It's weird.
Well, no, it doesn't.
Because if I'm on my computer or my phone or something with
Yeah.
a bunch of blue light, I mean,
I
granted, my
know.
eyes are open.
Well, okay, that's a big
It
deal.
will definitely make me more alert, and
That's a big
I'll
deal.
be more cortisol
Yeah.
than melatonin.
Yeah, but in this case, one, your eyelids are there, your eyes are closed,
Mhm.
and the other is like we talked about the Bluetooth thing earlier. Actually, incoming messaging overrides in most every case any amount of light stimulation that might be triggered. So I
Okay.
can't say that there's zero,
Right.
but the other process overrides that most typically in most people.
Right, that
So,
makes sense. It's
yeah.
much different putting this on than walking into a bathroom and turning on like a big bright LED light, right?
The
Where
halogen headlights.
yeah, where it's like immediately
Yeah,
stimulating.
no, it's a different animal.
Another thing interesting with the flickering light that you have, I mean,
Yeah.
in my world and things we talk about in terms of just interior ambient lighting is you want to avoid flicker, right? If you have
Yes.
fluorescent bulbs, LED bulbs, they
Yeah,
flicker flicker at 60 hertz. It's really agitating to you subconsciously and so
Yeah.
on. So I'm always like testing the flicker with slow motion videos, and there's
Take a pencil,
there's
right?
no yeah, there's
it's
no
like it's like trails when you're
Yeah.
you're tripping, right?
Totally. There's no flickering lights in this house for a
Uh-huh.
purpose, but I was thinking as you were talking about the lights,
Uh-huh.
the reason that this is not agitating is obviously because the frequency is very intentional
Yeah.
and varies. It isn't just stuck at 60 hertz, right?
No. It's I think shortcut through a longer thing. Shortcut. If you want to know what the brain loves to do and loves to experience, check out music. Because music is made by the brain for the brain. You don't have to be smart to enjoy music. You don't have to have a particular set of ideas. It's first language level, right?
Mhm.
And you know that without lyrics, without anything, you can experience. It's just pitches and tones and this thing, and you can feel sad, you can feel happy, you can feel courageous from the music. We've been able to work with mechanical vibration as humans for a long, long time. The first one, of course, is voice, then hitting things, percussion, and then so on and so on. We've been able to make material vibrate in a way that we can express the brain's language to itself. We've had sunlight, moonlight, firelight. We haven't had the tooled technology to do with light what we've done with sound. Right now, we're right on the cusp of finally having instruments that will finally let you see the music you love.
Hot damn.
Hot damn.
That's cool, man.
It is cool.
Who have been 3 teachers that have influenced your life that you might share with us?
My mother, my Tibetan Dzogchen teacher who's passed away, and Oscar, one of the apes that I've rehabbed and taken care of a
What's
lot.
Oscar like?
Oscar's amazing, man. He's a gibbon, a Southeast Asian ape. He was nearly dead from electrocution because in the forest there are too many high tension wires. They think they're a vine, so he almost died. And
Oh,
so he was
man. God, that's so
paralyzed.
sad.
They wanted to cut. And so I took just 2.5. I have up in the mountains. I had a sanctuary, and I had them actually living. A number of them living in the house with me. Very tolerant wife. And
Oh, my
this like
God.
goes on and on and on. And anyway, so it took 2.5 years, 6 days out of 7, that I had to bandage his hand, abscess wounds, infections, finger amputations, but bit by bit, the arms started to come back and more and more and more. Um, and we've domesticated certain animals to be the way that we want them to be. And then there are these things called wild animals. They're not wild. They're not wild at all. They're the most civilized, predictable, ordered, beings. We're the wild ones. We're the
Wow.
fucking crazy ones. We're the most dangerous animal on the planet. So, especially with primates, I'll make this short, but it's deeply meaningful to me. When in the wild, you don't do eye contact directly. It's very dangerous. It's very aggressive. It's confrontational. So, you don't do that. And, but when there's a lot of suffering and even death and all these things, as I've been, and I mean, okay, I'm putting my head down because it's super private stuff, but when they decide to open themselves to you, face to face, and go eye to eye and let themselves know you and let you know them, inexpressible. Inexpressible.
Wow.
It's like, oh, I'm so fucking arrogant. I apologize. Man, I really apologize. So, Oscar.
I'm glad I asked you to elaborate. It's a powerful note to end on.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, we've, you don't know what you've forgotten until you remember it.
Mm-hmm.
And we've forgotten a lot. A lot.
Well, thank you for helping us remember today, my friend.
It's a pleasure to be here, Luke. Thank you, man.
I'm so grateful you came to
Yeah.
spend some time with us.
Yeah. You're welcome. I know Thailand's just a jump away. You get in
I
this.
love Thailand.
You get this thing called an airplane. It's
I know,
amazing.
they terrify me.
They terrify you.
Oh my God. I mean, not the flying. I'm not afraid of flying. It's just like the experience of travel as a whole, But I love Thailand, man. Such cool people there. Such great people. And
tourism,
obviously just
COVID,
beautiful terrain.
COVID blew things up, but to finish up, in the tourist industry, you may know there's this thing called return rate. That if you leave your country, like Germany, and you go to Argentina, then you go back to Germany. What are the odds you're going to leave Germany and go back to Argentina again? That's the return rate, right? And of all the countries in the world, Thailand has the highest return rate of any country.
Really?
Yeah. If you go there one time, statistically, the odds are absolutely, if you leave your country, you'll go back to Thailand again.
That is
not
wild.
that you won't go to other countries,
Sure.
but that you will keep on going back to Thailand.
Wow. Well, I need to take part in that then, because I went and only went once.
You go south or north?
South.
Yeah, that's the party boy island, thing. But the grown-ups are in the north.
Yeah, is that the case?
That's the case,
Okay.
man. I think Chiang Mai, the city where I live, essentially, I think it has every possibility of being the next San Francisco.
Really?
Meaning, what happened in San Francisco, late '60s, early '70s, creativity, unusual thinking, liberal arts, the scientists that. The hippies that saved physics and everything. I think Chiang Mai, it's shifting east, number one. And I think Chiang Mai has all of the ingredients to be the next San Francisco.
Noted. We're going to keep our finger on the pulse of that. And thanks for reminding me how awesome Thailand is. I got to set the intention to get back over there.
Okay. Intention is what? What comes before intention?
Desire.
Motivation. Why?
Yeah. I don't know. Oh.
That's the thing. If you have an intention, look at what is motivating that intention.
Got it. Okay.
I want to go back to Thailand is your intention.
Right.
The question is, well, why do you want to go back? That is going to drive insight into your intent. Like, why would you want to go back to Thailand?
Right. Yeah.
Like,
to be in the jungle, to experience people that are from where they're from living successfully and happily.
And what would that do for you?
It would make me feel fulfilled.
Why would you be fulfilled with that?
Because it would add richness to my experience. Yeah.
Okay. And
variety and a change in perspective.
And what are you doing to do that right now?
I think really putting some effort into my present moment awareness
Okay.
to appreciate the nuance of the moment.
Okay. Rock on.
Rock on to you, my friend. Thanks, Garnet.
My pleasure. Absolutely, man.